I speak into the microphone against a backdrop of howling wind. Ice scratches against the window like nails on a coffin lid. The world beyond these walls is locked in an unending freeze. The polar vortex, once a seasonal anomaly, has become our permanent reality. Temperatures plunge far below any sane threshold. The sky is an endless slate of gray. The sun, a pale, reluctant glow that never fully breaks through. The land is unrecognizable. What used to be vibrant forests now stand as skeletal trees, their branches encased in thick rime. Rivers lie frozen solid, their currents silent beneath layers of ice that crack and groan with hidden stresses. Cities have become labyrinths of ice and rusted metal skyscrapers sheathed in frost, roads obscured by drifts tall as houses, abandoned. Cars stand as monuments to a world that moved too fast and never prepared for stillness so absolute. The air itself tastes metallic and thin. Breaths come short. Each exhale clouds the frigid air, then vanishes. Moisture is locked in ice. Finding water means melting snow or chiseling at frozen engines. Food is a memory in most places. Root stores were long depleted. Frozen grounds yield nothing. Wildlife is scarce, only the hardiest creatures cling on, gaunt foxes, scavenging ravens, wolves that roam under the pale sky in packs driven by desperation. The climate collapse began with heat. Now it has swung to cold extremes. Jet streams, disrupted, weather patterns warped. The polar vortex deepened, expanded, winters lengthened until summer barely registers. Heat waves give way to sudden flash freezes. Storms of ice sweep across the land unannounced, burying everything in punishing cold. Human society as we knew it is fractured. Governments collapsed under the strain of cascading disasters. Supply chains died. Communications splintered. Some pockets of survivors cling to old structures. Makeshift councils huddle around generators. Survivor outposts trade scavenged fuel for food. But trust is scarce. Alliance is fragile. Rogue factions roam, preying on the weak. Scavengers raid abandoned settlements. Travelers risk ambush in exchange for the hope of supplies or information. Institutions that once held sway, hospitals, universities, power grids are ghosts. Some stations still broadcast, powered by dwindling fuel or solar panels barely surviving under translucent ice. Few listen, yet the radio remains a lifeline, a whispered promise that others are out there, that someone still remembers how to speak, how to hope. Inside my shelter, the generator hums in rhythmic protest. Each cycle consumes precious fuel. Outside, the wind rattles the antenna, static hisses in my ear. Every broadcast is a gamble. Will the signal reach another soul, or will my words disappear into the frozen void? The setting is bleak. It feels permanent. The old landmarks are gone. Towns swallowed by ice fields. Highways cracked and buckled by frost. A one-screen valley is now a white wasteland, its contours erased by drifting snow. Mountains wear heavy coats of ice. Ocean currents have slowed. Sea ice stretches farther each year. Coastal cities lie submerged under choking layers of frozen water or battered by relentless storms. Yet beneath despair, there is a current of nervous anticipation. Every day could bring a new shift, a marginal warming, a thaw in some remote valley, a rumor of survivors discovering geothermal springs. But that anticipation is tinged with anxiety. Hope can be a cruel mirage. One false lead can cost lives. We brace for the unknown, feeling always on edge. This is our world now, a planet encased in frost, where survival means battling the elements and battling despair itself. The sky, once blue, is now an overcast dome that presses down on our spirits. The silence between storms is eerie, broken only by distant creaks of ice or the lonely call of a raven. Each sound reminds me the world has been reshaped beyond recognition. Yet I speak into this microphone because silence is worse. Even if no one answers, I refuse to let the static win. I am the voice you hear crackling through the radio. I don't have a name worth sharing. Names feel fragile, tied to a world that no longer exists. But you can call me the broadcaster or the voice. I survived the collapse in an old research outpost near the Arctic Circle, repurposed. As my shelter, it was meant for climate studies decades ago. But now it's my refuge, a battered station perched on frozen tundra. I am a survivor, though some days I question if surviving means merely clinging to routines in a world beyond hope. I once had a life, family, work, dreams. I was a climatologist. I studied patterns, warned of extremes. Now I live them. My station is outfitted with old equipment, a pedal generator, solar panels coated in frost, a diesel backup that sputters and coughs with every start. I ration fuel as if it were gold. Each liter burned for heat or signal is a choice. Stay alive another day or preserve resources for an uncertain future. My tasks vary. Monitoring weather shifts, scanning for other broadcasts, repairing broken circuits, melting ice for water. Each action demands effort and vigilance. I document environmental data, though I have nowhere to send it, but I record it anyway, as if telling the world, I was here, I witnessed this. The logs are my diary, my confession. They capture the horror, the small victories, a solar panel that survived a storm, a battery that charged against all odds, a message from a distant survivor. My personal losses run deep. In the early days of collapse, I tried to reach my family. Days of no response, then a final transmission, static, then silence. I cling to memories. My sister's laugh, my child's questions about the sky. I still imagine them listening somewhere, hoping my voice reaches them, but most likely they're gone. That loss shapes me, guilt for surviving when they could not. Determination to honor them by keeping this station alive, by speaking into the void so that their lives, and mine, do not vanish unseen. I survive by routine. At dawn or what passes for dawn I check fuel levels. I rotate tasks between maintenance, broadcasting, and foraging missions. Foraging means venturing out into the frozen world on snowmobiles or trudging with sleds. I search for fuel caches, fuel depots abandoned in panic, the remains of pre-collapse stockpiles. Every expedition is perilous. Sudden blizzards can bury a path in minutes. Shifting ice can crack beneath me. Frostbite stalks like a silent predator. I wear layers of insulated gear, goggles frosting over, gloves stiff. Each step leaves prints in snow that the wind will erase before long. My drive to keep going is complex. There's hope slender, fragile, that somewhere other survivors exist, that there might be a community somewhere, a place with warmth, food, maybe even laughter. There's responsibility. This station is one of the few still broadcasting. If I stop, I silence a beacon. There's human connection. I long to hear another voice respond, to share stories of survival, to remind myself I am not alone in this frozen night. And there's homage. Surviving is a tribute to those lost. I carry their memories into each broadcast. I am haunted by flashbacks. Before the freeze, cities teeming with life, summers of warmth. Now those images feel surreal, like memories from another life. My mind drifts. I recall the smell of rain, the color of grass, the taste of fresh fruit. These recollections fuel my sorrow and my resilience. I wonder, can the world ever feel green again? Or is this freeze our new reality? I have only a few companions. The humming generator, the creaking walls, a tattered journal. I keep a small hydroponic experiment, alive sprouts undergrow lights powered by the station. They remind me of life's tenacity, a green shoot emerging from darkness. It's a fragile experiment, but I tend it carefully. I whisper to the seedlings as though they are children. When the grow light flickers under power constraints, my heart pounds. If they die, it feels like losing another piece of hope. I catalog the environment. I note shifts in wind patterns, record anomalies, measure ice thickness. I pass this data into my log, though there's no one to receive it. Yet I believe that someday someone might find these records and understand our final days. I name each log entry after someone I lost. Entry for Sarah, entry for Jamal. It feels like keeping their voices alive at night. When the wind intensifies, I huddle near the radio, listening to static for signs of life. The static is like a companion, unpredictable, sometimes whispering fragments of distant signals. I sharpen my ears, hoping to detect a faint voice calling back. Each time I catch a hint, I scramble to boost the antenna, adjust frequency, amplify the signal. My heart races. Most times it's false, just noise. But once I caught a phrase, "Is anyone alive?" It lasted seconds before fading. That moment reignited something in me, the conviction that I am not utterly alone. Yet loneliness seeps. In days blend into nights. The cold gnaws at body and soul. Doubt creeps. Am I broadcasting into emptiness? Should I venture out to seek others? The risk is immense, but staying here may mean dying alone. I weigh each option endlessly. My voice carries the weight of all this. When I speak on the radio, I choose my words carefully, honest about the dangers, but laced with the faintest hope. I share practical advice: how to waterproof layers, how to find and melt snow safely, how to maintain a generator in sub-zero temperatures. I share my data, weather forecasts even if approximate, so that someone else might prepare. I share stories, memories of warmth, songs that once comforted me. Each broadcast is a lifeline extended into the void. I am both observer and participant in this frozen apocalypse. I witness the environment's cruelty and yet find beauty in crystalline patterns on ice, in the way dawn light refracts through snow. I feel the ache of loss, but also the spark that drives me to survive. My narrative is one of resilience amid despair. I carry the scars of what's been lost, but I refuse to let them define the end. I keep speaking, keep recording, keep surviving, and I hope that somewhere someone hears me. I press record on today's log. The primary crisis is no longer abstracted, is the unrelenting freeze that tightens its grip daily. The polar vortex persists, intensifying as the jet stream's wavering patterns lock cold air in place. Temperatures plunge to minus 60 degrees Celsius regularly, sometimes lower with wind chill. At these extremes, metal becomes brittle, machinery fails, and human flesh risks freezing within minutes if exposed. Survival grows harder each day. Fuel is dwindling. The diesel generator sputters more often. Each refill from scavenged caches is a gamble. I estimate I have enough fuel for 4 more major broadcasts, maybe 2 if I ration strictly. Solar panels yield almost nothing under the perpetual overcast, and battery storage degrades with the cold. I salvage what I can, old wind, turbines from the research station. But winds are unpredictable, sometimes fierce blasts, sometimes eerie stillness. I have modified the turbine blades, but they yield only intermittent power. Energy scarcity is a crisis. Without power, there is no heat, no communications, no light. Food is a relentless concern. My hydroponic sprouts survive under grow lights, but yields are minimal. Handfuls of leafy greens that supplement my canned ration stash. But canned supplies are nearly gone. Scavenging expeditions yield mostly empty caches. Permafrost soil yields almost nothing. Attempts at hardy root crops failed when temperatures plunged further than expected. I know the science. Photosynthesis cannot proceed without reliable light and heat. The greenhouse is a fragile bubble in a frozen desert. Each seed planted is a wager against death. Water is technically abundant as ice, but melting requires fuel or electricity. I manage by heating, small batches at a time, conserving both energy and water. Too slow, too laborious. If the heater fails, I must venture out with portable stoves, risking frostbite, crevasses, sudden blizzards. Some days the station's insulation fails. Heat seeps out, pipes freeze. I patch leaks with salvaged foam and tape, but each repair, it is temporary. Beyond personal survival, the crisis threatens any notion of community. The environment has turned mindless. Storms strike without warning. Frozen fog coats equipment in layers of ice. Toxic air pockets form from trapped gases under ice. I monitor barometric readings. Sudden drops hint at storms. I broadcast alerts, but will anyone be in listening range? Even if they hear, do they have means to act? A warning means little without resources. Scientifically, the polar vortex's behavior has changed due to greenhouse gas-driven warming at lower latitudes, disrupting temperature gradients. The weakening of the polar jet stream allowed cold air to spill south, but now the Arctic itself is plunging deeper into cold as feedback loops run amok, altered ocean currents, misbalanced albedo effects. The research I once contributed to predicted extremes, but nothing prepared us for a near-permanent vortex. I explained these mechanics into the microphone. Data on temperature trends, ice thickness variations, readings from high-altitude probes I once launched but now cannot retrieve. I speak plainly. I want whoever hears to understand the forces arrayed against us. But practicality looms. Larger, how to live within this crisis. I share tactics, layering clothing with insulating fabrics, ensuring moisture wicking to prevent sweat freeze, fashioning makeshift heat exchangers from scavenged pipes, creating passive solar heaters using reflective panels and insulated boxes to catch rare daylight. I describe how to harvest ice from frozen lakes safely, tapping at the edges where ice is thinner, melting over efficient stoves. I explain safe generator operation in cold, pre-warming engines in insulated enclosures, using antifreeze mixtures scavenged from abandoned vehicles. I speak of pitfalls, fuel contamination by water, battery failures at low temperatures, brittle metal failures that risk catastrophic breakdowns. This is not theory. It is the grim reality I face daily. Resources vanish rapidly. I track fuel caches, mapped before the collapse. Some are empty or destroyed. I risk journeys to distant depots, navigating by compass and makeshift maps overlaying shifting ice. Raiders patrol some routes, other survivors desperate enough to seize fuel or food by force. I've encountered armed groups, faces masked, eyes wild. Once, I fled under cover of a storm, heart pounding as snow blinded me. I know violence is rising as desperation grows. The crisis yields not just environmental hazards, but human threats. Trust is a luxury few can afford. Communications also suffer. Static cuts signals. Equipment fails from frost. I repair circuits with trembling hands and freezing air. I broadcast at scheduled times, announcing frequencies, hoping someone tunes in. I record messages on loops, weather reports, survival tips, pleas for contact. I sometimes leave encoded logs on frequencies reserved for scientific channels, hoping any remaining stations detect them. Each broadcast drains precious energy, but silence feels like admitting defeat. Beyond the immediate, the crisis weighs on morale. I witness psychological erosion, isolation, despair, creeping hopelessness. My own resolve falters. Some nights I stare at the dark sky, wondering if continuing makes sense. But I push on, reminding myself, hope, however tenuous, is victory. Enough. Each recorded log is my testament. Each broadcast is a beacon. Each day survived is proof that humanity can endure, even when swallowed by ice. I also study patterns, slight temperature fluctuations, occasional thaws in remote valleys fed by geothermal springs. Rumors speak of pockets where warmth persists, abandoned research stations tapping geothermal heat, underground bunkers insulated from the worst extremes. I broadcast these rumors, warning of scams but describing how to verify a location, coordinates, recognizable landmarks under ice. I blend caution with possibility. Maybe someone finds these hints and embarks on a journey. The journey is perilous. Travel across frozen wastelands, navigation via instruments that drift under magnetic anomalies, risking storms that can bury travelers alive, but a chance at community or sustainable heat source is worth it. I also explain environmental consequences, methane trapped in permafrost releasing in pockets, causing toxic pockets of air or sudden blazes when ignited, weakened ecosystems unable to rebound, feedback loops pushing climate further into instability. I detail how these changes affect survival, unpredictable weather, unstable terrain, outbreaks of new pathogens from thawed soils. I speak as both scientist and survivor. I know the mechanics, and I feel the dread they bring. This crisis section, it is not just exposition. It is lived experience. Every statistic echoes in my bones as I step outside and feel the wind slash my face. Every forecast I relay is weighted by my knowledge of what happens if warnings go unheeded. I paint the crisis in factual terms, numbers, data, science, while also laying bare the terror, the gnawing fear when storms loom, the desperation when supplies run low, the dread of silence when the radio goes dead. The conflict is clear. The environment is turning hostile beyond previous limits, and resources and morale are dwindling. My struggle is to survive physically and to keep the spark of community alive through radio. I stand at the edge of collapse, broadcasting facts and hope in equal measure, preparing for the moment when I must choose between clinging to this outpost or venturing into the unknown in search of others. The crisis rages around and within me, the race against freezing death, the challenge of keeping machines alive in sub-zero, the test of my resolve as isolation tightens its grip. This is the battle against the polar vortex, against dwindling resources, and against despair itself. The days blur into one another. Each morning begins with checking instruments. Temperature gauges report minus 58 degrees Celsius outside. Wind speed sensors show 80 kilometers per hour gusts. Ice accumulates on the antenna. I chip it away before broadcasting. I scan frequencies, listening for any sign of life. Mostly static, yet sometimes a faint signal, a cough of words in the noise. I rush to adjust dials, hoping to catch more. Often it vanishes. Every fragment of a voice ignites both hope and frustration. Supplies shrink. The generator's fuel gauge inches toward empty. I ration broadcasts, reduce length, lower power, shift times. Still, I broadcast daily, weather forecasts, survival, advice, coded messages, coordinates of room at safe zones. Encrypted, please. If you hear this, respond at frequency 7.82 MHz at 0600 UTC. I monitor reception reports, none come, but I continue. Silence is our common enemy. Each broadcast is a stand against oblivion. I decide it may be time to venture beyond the station. Rumor speaks of a survivor enclave 500 kilometers south, in what used to be a geothermal research facility near a volcanic ridge. The coordinates are uncertain, maps are unreliable. I weigh risks. The journey could take weeks in a snowmobile strapped to survival gear. Storms could bury me. Fuel might run out halfway. But staying here guarantees gradual death when fuel or food runs out. The possibility of community beckons, yet is likely a trap or myth. I wrestle with doubt. Is it wiser to broadcast from safety or risk all for a chance at human contact? Meanwhile, threats escalate. Raider groups hunt along supply routes. I intercepted a transmission, guttural voices discussing ambushes near abandoned fuel caches. I broadcast warnings, avoid these routes. If forced through, travel in daylight, move quietly. But if others hear that, raiders might shift tactics. Information is double-edged. Sharing safety tips might provoke new dangers. I wrestle with ethics, what to broadcast, what to withhold. Every word on air may shape someone's fate. Storms intensified. A massive polar storm approaches, barometric readings plummet. I secure the station, reinforce windows, insulate doors, stock extra firewood. I brace for the howl of the storm, knowing it could last days. I broadcast a storm alert, prepare to hunker down. Expect at least 72 hours of extreme winds and whiteout. I include advice on securing vents, conserving heat, avoiding carbon monoxide poisoning by ensuring ventilation when burning fuel indoors. But will anyone hear? The act of broadcasting calms my own nerves. It is ritual, a way to assert control. When the world spins wild, inside, tension builds. I dream of movement. I pace the cramped quarters, stare at maps pinned to walls, trace routes with gloved fingers. I go over gear, check spare parts for the snowmobile, pack dried food, medical supplies. I inventory every liter of fuel in hidden barrels. Each decision weighs heavily. Bring more fuel for cooking but risk extra weight slowing travel. Bring more spare parts but risk space for food. I list contingencies. What if snowmobile fails? I pack a manual survival kit, tent, thermal blankets, flares, compass, emergency radio beacon. I prepare for solitary travel across a frozen ocean of snow and ice. Interactions with other survivors happen through brief radio chatter. One voice distorted young asked about rationing techniques. I answered, sharing my experience. She mentioned traveling north. I warned of storms. The signal cut out. Was she real or a phantom in the static, testing me? These fleeting encounters, sharp intention, the hope of connection, the fear of deception, the question, can I trust voices on the air? Each broadcast I end with, if you respond, identify yourself by code word Aurora. Few replies come. Some reply Aurora but from unknown origin. I record them, analyzing patterns, looking for consistency. It's detective work. In the void, the environment yields surprises. I detect slight geothermal activity readings from a sensor left active near a hot spring region. It hints at warmth beneath the ice possibility of a refuge. I broadcast approximate coordinates with caveats, verify terrain, risk of unstable ice. Proceed only if well equipped. I fear giving false hope but feel compelled if no one ventures. This knowledge dies with me. If someone risks it and finds warmth, maybe they survive and rescue others. The tension between caution and hope grows acute. Supply runs become urgent. Before the storm, I ventured to a cache 100 kilometers away. The journey nearly killed me. The snowmobile engine stalled in minus 55 degrees Celsius. I had to manually clear the carburetor in the storm's fringe. My hands numb. Frostbite threatened fingertips. I reached the cache, half-empty drums of diesel, spoiled rations. I loaded what I could, traveled back under dim light. Each night I relived that ordeal, proof that any expedition is a gamble with death. Inside the station, isolation gnaws at me. I talk to the radio as if it's a companion. I record personal reflections. Today I felt fear I haven't felt since the collapse began, yet I also felt something like courage. I speak of the conflict within, desire to stay and keep broadcasting, versus desire to join others. I confess doubts, will I regret leaving or staying? I share these candid reflections on air, hoping someone hears and finds solace in my honesty. Trust issues intensify. When a voice claiming to represent a survivor group contacts me, they claim to have an organized community at the geothermal site. They ask me to bring my equipment and skills, but the transmission is garbled. I cannot verify authenticity. Could be raiders luring me into ambush. Could be genuine. I debate, respond with cautious questions, ask for proof. They provide vague details, landmarks under ice, an old tower repurposed for heat. I cross-reference with my maps, a match, others don't. I decide to send a coded reply, request confirmation of known scientific data from my logs. If they reference my previous broadcasts accurately, they might be real. They reply with details that match some logs but also include inconsistencies. The back and forth intensifies my tension. Trust versus caution, hope versus self-preservation. The storm finally strikes full force. Inside the station, every piece of equipment shakes. Ice piles against reinforced windows. I keep broadcasting brief updates. Storm strength, expected duration. Each transmission strains the generator but can't be abandoned. Perhaps someone at the other end is hunkering down, listening. At night, I sit in semi-darkness, lit by emergency lights, clutching a mug of lukewarm tea. The wind's roar is a constant reminder of nature's power and my fragility. Within the storm's howl, I dream. I see the geothermal enclave, warm stone walls, flickering lamps, voices sharing stories around a fire. I wake with a jolt. Is it real or wishful hallucination? I check instruments. Storm intensifies. I must conserve fuel. I decide, when the storm subsides, I will venture out. I prepare a final broadcast. If this is my last transmission from this station, know that I risk everything for hope of connection. If you hear nothing further, may these recordings guide someone to survive. I steel myself. The journey's risk is immense, but staying means fading alone. Each moment in these days carries the weight of decision. The rising action is not a singular event, but a series of escalating pressures, dwindling resources, intensifying storms, uncertain messages from others, inner turmoil about trust and hope. The environment's cruelty and the human stakes interweave. Every broadcast could lead someone to safety or danger. Every scavenging run could secure life or seal my fate. I stand on a knife's edge, aware that the next step venturing into the frozen unknown could change everything. The storm finally breaks. I emerge from the station into a world reshaped, drifts taller than my snowmobile, ice sculpted into alien ridges by gale forces. The air is crisp, but eerily calm, a deceptive lull. I load my sled, spare fuel, food, tools, radio gear, medical kit. I strap on layers, check each buckle. My snowmobile's engine struggles but starts. Each chug echoes in the frozen silence. I travel. The landscape tests me. Hidden crevasses beneath thin snow. Ice that flexes ominously. Winds that pick up without warning. I navigate by compass in the sun's faint glow, adjusting for magnetic anomalies in this polar region. Memories flash. My last expedition fuel almost spent. Storm closing in from behind. Now I feel both dread and determination. Every kilometer is a gamble between life and death. Midway through the journey, I detect a radio transmission on my designated frequency. Faint, distorted but unmistakable. Broadcaster, do you copy? My heart races. I answer. Static hisses, then a strained voice. We hear you. We've been monitoring. You are approaching coordinates of Enclave Omega. Confirm identity. I recite the code words we agreed upon, then refer to specific data locked in my logs. They respond with precise reference to my previous broadcasts. Descriptions of generator, modifications, weather readings, mention of my hydroponic sprouts. They seem genuine. Relief floods me, but caution remains. Could still be a trap. Yet the voice is tone-worn but hopeful, suggests authenticity. The transmission continues. We are low on supplies. We need someone with your skills, but storms are increasing. Rendezvous at the old volcanic monitoring station 10 kilometers ahead before nightfall. They provide landmark details. A rusted antenna array half buried in ice, a cavern entrance warmed by geothermal vents. I scan ahead. Through the snow haze, I spot angular shapes emerging. The battered antenna, a surge of hope and fear. If this is real, I might find shelter, warmth, community. If false, I risk walking into ambush or worse. Frozen death, I approach slowly, engine idling, the cold bites through layers. I feel adrenaline and fatigue intertwined. I dismount, walk toward the antenna, crunching snow under boots. I scan surroundings, open space for lookouts, no obvious threat. I reach the antenna base, see fresh footprints in the snow size consistent with a human wearing heavy boots. My pulse quickens. I broadcast, I am here, proceeding to entrance. I move toward the cavern entrance. Steam rises from cracks. In the rock, a faint warmth that seems miraculous in this frozen wasteland. Inside the cavern, torches flicker, illuminating rough walls. A small group emerges, gaunt figures in layered clothing. Faces lined with hardship but eyes bright with cautious relief. They greet me, not with weapons raised, but with measured arms. I recognize some from prior broadcasts. Maybe voices I heard. Maybe strangers. They guide me deeper, past makeshift sleeping areas around a central hearth heated by geothermal vents. Inside, it's warm enough to shed layers. The heat wraps around me like reclaimed life. The enclave is fragile but alive. Hydroponic bays powered by geothermal-driven turbines, small but growing. Water from a spring trickles, filtered through salvaged equipment. A communal area where survivors share stories, tend to wounds, plan next moves. They explain. They've been listening to my broadcasts, which gave them hope and knowledge. They ask about my station, about other survivors. They share what they know. Other enclaves exist. Some failed due to fuel shortages, others overtaken by raiders. They invite me to join efforts, pool resources, share research on making renewable heat extraction more efficient, coordinate communications. But the turning point is not solely joyful. The enclave faces its own crisis. Seismic readings indicate unstable ground. Geothermal pressures rising, risk of volcanic activity. The cave could collapse or vent toxic gases. Supplies remain limited. The cold outside intensifies, cutting off external contact. They need my expertise to modify heating, systems to reduce stress on vents, to optimize insulation, to develop better rationing methods. I realize joining them means committing to a new struggle one, where survival depends not just on individual grit, but on collective effort and shared risk. That as I settle by the hearth, I reflect on choices. The perilous journey nearly cost me my life. If I had hesitated, dismissed the signals as trap, I might still be broadcasting alone. Here warmth and community await, but so does new responsibility. I cannot simply survive. I must help ensure the enclave endures. My inner conflict resolves, hope tempered by realism. I vow to contribute fully, even if it means more danger, because survival without purpose feels hollow. Yet, even this refuge bears immediate threat. A tremor shakes the cavern, dust falls from the ceiling. Experts here explain. The geothermal system's overuse could trigger an eruption or collapse. They ask, can I design a way to balance energy extraction with structural safety? My mind races. I recall old research on adaptive heat exchangers, dynamic insulation, passive ventilation. I promise to work on it, knowing that failure means doom for all here. The climax is twofold. Externally, the discovery of a potential refuge. Internally, the protagonist's reckoning, choosing to step from isolation into community with all attendant risks. I realized the journey's meaning. Broadcasting into the void was my way of keeping hope alive. Now that hope manifests in tangible form, I accept that survival is not about solitary endurance, but about forging bonds, sharing burdens, and facing greater dangers together. Yet danger is immediate, a sudden alert, toxic gas levels rising near the geothermal vent. The group scrambles, gas masks on, ventilators activated. I dive into planning, reroute vents, adjust flow, monitor sensors. The moment is life or death. My hands shake as I handle instruments, but determination steadies me. The cavern's fate hinges on swift action. As alarms echo, I act, recalibrate valves, direct survivors to safe zones deeper in the tunnel. The tension peaks, the ground rumbles, steam hisses. We work as one. My knowledge, their labor. Finally, the tremors subside, gas levels drop. We exhale relief. The enclave lives another day. In that moment I understand, survival is a fragile equilibrium. The crisis from which I fled now follows me here, but now I face it with others. This turning point redefines my purpose. No longer just a lone broadcaster fighting despair, but a member of a community battling environmental extremes together. The stakes have grown. If I fail now, many die. If I succeed, we carve a chance for future generations. The choice is clear. Embrace collective struggle, or retreat back into lonely broadcasts. I choose to stay, fight alongside these survivors. The storm outside may rage, but inside, a new resolve blazes. In the days following the crisis, the enclave settles into a tense rhythm. Repairs to the geothermal system proceed under my guidance. We install adaptive flow controls, channeling excess heat into insulated reservoirs rather than venting too forcefully. We reinforce cavern walls with scaffolding and use salvaged steel plates to shore up weak points. Each action is painstaking under extreme conditions. Tools chill in my hands. Sweat on my brow freezes instantly if exposed, but together we push. Through fatigue, the shared purpose binds us. Survival now a communal endeavor. I broadcast from the enclave's radio station, a stronger transmitter powered by geothermal-driven turbines. It's a bittersweet moment. My voice now comes from a place of warmth. Yet I know broadcasts draw attention both hopeful and dangerous. I speak to anyone listening. This is the broadcaster alive, broadcasting from Enclave Omega. We have warmth, limited supplies, but need contact with other survivors. If you receive this, respond with code word Aurora. We offer knowledge, exchange, and aid. Each word carries weight. I feel the old trepidation, but also renewed conviction. This is the evolution of my role. From isolated announcer to coordinator of networks of survivors, reflections swirl. I recall the long nights alone in my station, the agonizing choice to leave, the harrowing journey. Now, surrounded by others, I reassess solitude's price. I realize solitude sharpened my resolve, but also bred fear and doubt. In community, fear shifts, fear for many lives rather than only mine. The burden of responsibility grows heavier, but purpose intensifies. The enclave's members share stories. One woman, Elaine, attended her child alone through the early freeze. Another, Kareem, lost his family to a storm but survived on crusted bread and determination. Their tales mirror mine. Grief, grit, fleeting hope. We honor memories. We place photos. Near the hearth, whisper names. I lead sessions where we record oral histories, catalog environmental data, and plan survival strategies. My logs become communal archives, enriched by multiple voices rather than solitary entries. Outside conditions remain deadly. Storms isolate us periodically. Supply runs to salvage equipment or scout for other survivors test our limits. Each outing I accompany, we traverse frozen plains to retrieve broken wind turbine parts or to check rumored caches. I teach navigation, reading subtle shifts in snow patterns, using stellar cues when skies clear briefly. I reiterate survival protocols, layering, sheltering in snow trenches during sudden blizzards, rationing fuel meticulously. We test hybrid power setups, combining geothermal heat with wind turbines and minimal solar input. Progress is incremental, but real. We extend battery life, improve insulation in living quarters, refine hydroponic setups using waste heat. Small victories buoy morale, yet dangers persist. Raiders hear our broadcasts. We detect signals probing for weaknesses. We encode transmissions, rotate frequencies, use directional antennas. We train watch teams to guard entry points. Trust remains delicate. Any outsider arriving could be friend or foe. We develop verification protocols, ask specific questions. Only genuine survivors would know details from prior exchanges. I draw on my broadcasting experience, vet transmissions by cross-referencing prior data, voice patterns, and shared code phrases. Internally, I confront guilt. I left the station, where I broadcasted alone, yet that act became catalyst for this community's birth. Should I have stayed broadcasting longer? Could another survivor have heard and joined sooner? These thoughts swirl, but I anchor myself in present tasks. Improving life here, expanding networks. I accept that choices in crisis always carry unknown consequences, that I reflect on how the environment has changed us. We are no longer just individuals. We form a fragile society under ice. We discuss governance, decisions made by council of survivors with roles as engineers, scouts, medics, communications. I chair communications. We draft charters, share resources fairly, make collective decisions about expeditions. This micro-society feels precious but precarious. A misstep overusing geothermal reserves or trusting the wrong outsider could collapse it. Hope flickers in small ways. Sprouts grow faster as we refine light cycles. We experiment with mushroom cultivation in insulated rooms. We salvage seeds from preserved stockpiles. We study old research manuals I brought from my station, protocols for extremophile organisms, potential for algae growth under lead. Each experiment is a step toward longer-term sustainability. I log data meticulously. Perhaps future generations, if any survive, will build on this foundation. Emotionally, I feel transformation. The loneliness that once defined me yields to camaraderie, yet I mourn private solitude, nights when only my voice answered back. Those days honed my resilience, but also isolated me from human warmth. Now I sleep in a communal chamber, in layered blankets, listening to others' soft breaths. I dream of voices beyond these walls. Maybe other enclaves will respond. The possibility of rebuilding networks across frozen wastes gives me purpose. Still, I remain vigilant. I schedule regular training drills. What if geothermal system fails? Catastrophically, we rehearse evacuations to emergency shelters deeper in the tunnel. We stockpile essential supplies. We map exit routes. I lead risk assessments, monitor seismic activity, gas levels, structural integrity. The crisis never fully abates. We navigate a tightrope between hope and disaster. Periodically, I venture back to my original station to check remaining equipment. I find that without my presence, the generator died. Solar panels, buried in snow, cracked under ice weight. I broadcast a final farewell from that site, leaving data archives and instructions for any future traveler. It feels like laying to rest a part of myself. I speak into the silent microphone. To whoever finds this, I was here. I recorded the last days of solitary broadcasting, but life moved me onward. Use these records if they help. Keep speaking, keep hoping. I leave. The station sealed but marked with a sign and coordinates leading to Enclave Omega. Reflection deepens. The world remains hostile, but we carve pockets of life. The larger environment, it may yet shift. Perhaps slight thawing cycles appear in distant seasons, though unpredictable. We hold on to fragments of old science, hope that climate may eventually stabilize or that technology might adapt. But we accept uncertainty and focus on immediate tasks. Sustain life here, connect with others. Record history. My inner self changes. I transition from lone survivor to community leader. The broadcaster role expands. I not only send advice but also coordinate multi-enclave dialogues, exchange data across distances when possible. Each connection strengthens collective resilience. Fear remains if communications go silent, if raiders strike, if geothermal vents fail. But fear is tempered by solidarity. Facing threats together multiplies our strength in quieter moments. I reflect on purpose. Why continue broadcasting? Because silence means surrender. Each message affirms existence. Each log entry preserves our story. The storm outside may rage, but within these caverns, our voices weave a tapestry of resilience. I hold on to the image of my lost family. I imagine them listening, proud that I found community even in a frozen world. Their memory fuels my efforts here. The aftermath of the climax brings challenges and growth. The enclave thrives tenuously, but the struggle continues. We adapt, innovate, defend, and connect. I reflect on how the turning point reshaped everything. My solitary battle became a shared quest. In this fragile sanctuary, life persists, proof that even in the harshest conditions, humanity endures when we unite. Now I sit by the hearth in the cavern's communal area, penning this final broadcast log for the day. Warmth seeps into my bones, yet I feel the cold edge of reality just beyond these walls. The world remains frozen, unpredictable. Each sunrise when the pale light creeps through cracks above reminds me our struggle is ongoing. There is no final victory, only continuous effort. Hope is fragile here. Supplies remain limited. Geothermal systems strain. Storms still cut us off. Yet each day brings small victories, a stable harvest from hydroponics, a successful repair to turbines, a new contact on the radio in distant wastes. These moments are precious. They remind us that life can flourish even when the world seems dead. Each green sprout, each shared meal, each voice on the air is a testament to resilience. I think of those who remain out there, braving the elements without refuge. I broadcast nightly data on our enclave's protocols, coordinates to reach us with caveats, survival tips refined by our collective experience. I know some will hear and attempt a journey, some will perish en route, some may bring new skills and strengthen us. This network of exchange is the lifeline I champion. Silence would mean stagnation, no new knowledge, no new hope. I also reflect on memory and loss. We honor those gone names inscribed on stones near the entrance, whispered during quiet moments. Grief is part of survival. Acknowledging it prevents numbness. I encourage survivors to share stories, songs, fragments of culture. We record them, digitally, storing data on drives shielded from cold. Should a future generation emerge, these archives will tell them who we were, what we endured, what we cherished. Yet I refuse to romanticize suffering. The cold is brutal. Lives are lost unexpectedly. Blizzards, equipment failures, accidents. Each loss cuts deep. We mourn, adapt, strengthen protocols. We train more, reinforce structures, but accept that risk cannot be eliminated. The world we inhabit demands vigilance. I also pondered the broader future. Climate extremes may eventually shift. Perhaps centuries from now, patterns alter. Maybe the freeze eases or new ecosystems emerge adapted to cold, but that distant future feels abstract when each day is a struggle. We focus on the present, surviving, building knowledge, forging connections. I document experiments with energy harvesting, sustainable food production in cold climates, medical protocols for frost-related injuries. These records might one day guide those who come after war, even guide us if conditions evolve. My final message balances realism with resolve. I do not promise a hopeful ending in the conventional sense. I cannot assure that the enclave endures indefinitely or that civilization is reborn, but I affirm that as long as voices speak into the void, as long as we share knowledge and care for one another, there is a spark of hope. That spark may flicker under gale winds, but it endures when we nurture it. Tonight I broadcast this is the broadcaster of Enclave Omega. If you hear me, you are not alone. The world outside remains cruel, but here we survive by shared effort. We have warmth, water, food enough for now. We offer guidance, alliance, and a record of our experiences. Bring what you have, skills, stories, data. If you come, be prepared for hardship. Travel only when conditions permit. Trust must be earned. We will verify you through shared code phrases and questions. To those still isolated, use this information to adapt your shelters. Share with others if you find them. Every piece of knowledge could save lives. Remember, life persists because we refuse to surrender to silence. I pause the broadcast and listen to static. I imagine someone, somewhere, tuning in a flicker in the void. Maybe they respond, maybe not. But I send this message because silence is the enemy. Each transmission threads us into a network of survivors, weaving a tapestry with resistance against the frozen apocalypse. I reflect on my transformation. I began as a lone voice in the void, haunted by loss. Now I am part of a fragile community, carrying collective memory and shared purpose. I understand that survival is not merely about enduring each night's cold, but about forging connections that defy isolation. We build small sanctuaries in the ice, not out of denial of the world's ruin, but as defiance. We declare that humanity's spark need not be extinguished by climate's cruelty. This conclusion is neither unbridled optimism nor utter despair. It acknowledges the harsh truth. The polar vortex remains. Storms will come. Resources will challenge us. But within that truth lies meaning. To struggle is to live. To care for others is to find purpose. To record our experiences is to claim existence. The world may not return to what it was, but something new can emerge. Communities adapted to extremes. Knowledge forged in hardship, empathy deepened by shared adversity. I close this day's log with a final reflection. If you listen and are alone, take heart in these words. Prepare carefully, weigh risks. Hold on to hope, however slight. If you join us here or form your own enclave, remember that cooperation outlives solitude. If you find no safe haven yet, keep broadcasting. Keep recording your own story. Every voice matters. Every tale of survival builds a collective narrative that outlives individual lives. Our world may be frozen, but our voices can warm each other across the ice. I end with gratitude. To those who remain, to those who listen, to those who will carry this forward. The struggle continues. Tomorrow we will tend turbines, probe for new heat sources, train scouts, refine our shelters, and perhaps hear a new voice answer back. As long as breath warms our lungs, as long as hearts beat, we have a chance. Stay alive, stay human. The polar vortex may encase the world in ice, but it cannot freeze the determination to endure. I peer through the frost-laced window of my shelter and see a world strangled by cold. The polar vortex, once a seasonal terror, has become permanent. The sky is a muted gray, heavy with ice. Sunlight is a pale memory, a weak glow behind a veil of frozen clouds. This is not just winter, it is an endless freeze that has swallowed seasons and hope alike. Landmarks lie buried or warped beyond recognition. Cities that once thrummed with life now stand as silent monuments to hubris. Skyscrapers loom under thick ice coats, their glass facades shattered or opaque with frost. Streets are choked by drifts taller than vehicles, sidewalks fractured by frost heave. Parks have become fields of jagged ice, where trees, stripped of leaves, stand like skeletal sentinels. Rivers, once lifelines, lie sealed under meters of ice. Lakes are silent plates of glass, concealing depths that once teemed with fish. Coastal areas, battered by storms and then locked in freeze, reveal half-submerged structures at their edges, signs of water that rose before the cold claimed them. The climate collapse that began in heat waves and wildfires spiraled into chaos. Jet streams destabilized, weather extremes amplified. Then came the deep freeze. Now, temperature extremes swing wildly. Sudden flash freezes snap equipment and freeze breath midair. Storms of icy shards roar across barren plains. Somewhere drought and flood still rage in other zones, but here the tyranny is cold. The very air seems hostile. Each inhaled breath stings the throat, and any exposed skin risks frostbite in minutes. Moisture is locked in ice. Finding drinkable water means melting snow under makeshift stoves, burning precious fuel. Government structures have crumbled under cascading crises. National authorities collapsed when supply chains failed and civil unrest erupted over scarce resources. Now there is no central rule, only fragments. Some former military units reorganized into protection rackets, controlling pockets of territory. Around fuel caches or geothermal sites, rogue factions roam the wastelands, scavengers, raiders, and survivalist cults that worship the cold as punishment or test. These groups strike with brutal efficiency. Ambushes on those seeking supplies, extortion of small survivor camps, destruction of rival enclaves. Trust as currency more valuable than food or fuel, yet also in shortest supply. Survivor groups cling. Two old institutions in ragged form, scientists huddled in remote research outposts repurposed for refuge, engineers maintaining battered generators, doctors running improvised clinics where hypothermia and frostbite dominate cases. Some enclaves guard what remains of digital archives, libraries of knowledge on agriculture, engineering, medicine, to rebuild when conditions allow. But many archives lie lost. Servers drowned in floods or frozen beyond access. Communication networks exist in shards. Isolated radio broadcasters like me sending signals into the void, hoping someone listens. Occasionally a reply crackles through static, a fleeting reminder that humanity endures elsewhere. But confirmation is rare and unreliable. The environment tests every instinct. Scavenging means venturing into the open where storms can arrive. Without warning, burying tracks and equipment. Navigation is treacherous. Maps shift as landscapes alter under ice. GPS often fails under magnetic anomalies in polar regions. Survivors travel in small teams, armed and wary, balancing the need for cooperation against fear of betrayal. Camps are fortified with insulated walls built from scavenged materials, shipping containers, metal sheets, insulated foam panels. Inside, warmth is generated by diesel or geothermal sources. Even then, temperatures hover just above freezing. Supplies are rationed ruthlessly. Food, fuel, medicine, even conversation, measured in minutes. Institutions that once sustained society, hospitals, universities, power grids exist only as skeletons. Hospitals operate as triage tents patched into geothermal springs when available. Most advanced equipment long unusable. Universities survive in pockets. Scholars who retreated to cold, stable regions kept archives running on minimal power, but now they cling to theory and memory, unable to conduct new research at scale. Power grids collapsed. Microgrids powered by wind turbines or geothermal generators serve tiny enclaves. Solar panels lie buried under snow or cracked by frost. Wind turbines spin erratically under violent gusts, often damaged. Fuel caches from before the collapse are fiercely contested. Many lie empty or poisoned. Some hide traps set by raiders. Human struggle persists in small acts, forging alliances around shared resources, protecting children and the elderly in makeshift warm rooms, trading knowledge on how to maintain engines in Sub-Zero, or how to scavenge edible lichens or hydroponic setups salvaged from labs. But anxiety claws at every mind. Will the generator last until next supply run? Will the geothermally heated cavern collapse under pressure? Will a storm strand a scouting party forever in the white wasteland? Even feelings of safety are fleeting. A creaking wall, a sudden tremor, can signal the end. Yet beneath the bleakness there is a tremor of anticipation, nervous, wary. Rumors circulate of pockets where warmth lingers, volcanic vents, deep underground bunkers insulated from the worst. Some survivors chase those rumors across frozen deserts, guided by half-forgotten coordinates or hearsay. Others experiment with new survival tactics using insulated tents tethered to heated water pipes, cultivating algae under LED lights scavenged from research stations, or devising makeshift heat exchangers from scrap metal. These efforts glimmer with the possibility that the freeze may not be permanent, or that humanity can carve out sanctuaries until conditions shift. The setting is irreversibly altered. The world as it was, green fields, flowing rivers, blue skies, exists only in memory and fading recordings. Now, landscapes are monochrome, white expanses, steel-gray ruins, charcoal silhouettes of dead forests frozen in time. The silence between storms is oppressive, broken only by the howl of wind against metal or the distant crack of ice. Every day brings uncertainty. A supply run might bring salvage or death. A broadcast might reach a fellow survivor or vanish, unheard. A sudden thaw could reveal new resources or unleash buried dangers. This is the world's present, a somber tableau of environmental collapse, where human resilience is tested against relentless cold and fractured societies. Anxiety pervades each description. For the next threat looms always: a storm, a raider attack, equipment failure, or the slow erosion of hope. Yet within this bleakness, the act of witnessing and recounting becomes a lifeline. To name the frozen wasteland is to assert that we still exist, still remember what was lost, and still dare to imagine what might come next. I am the voice on the radio you may catch between static bursts, a lone broadcaster transmitting from the edge of the Arctic. Freeze. My name no longer matters. Names belong to a world that has slipped into ice. But for clarity, call me Anissa. I once wore a different title: climatologist, researcher, teacher. Now I am a survivor, a teller of truths in a world where truth itself feels fragile. I speak into the microphone each dawn or what passes for dawn, my breath misting in the frigid air, because speaking is how I anchor myself to existence. When the Vortex claimed permanence, I retreated to this weather outpost at the northern fringe. It was built for data gathering, sensors, instruments, a small lab. Now it is my refuge and prison. My routines define the thin line between life and death. Each morning I awaken before the dim glow filters through frost-coated windows. I check the diesel generator's gauge-fueled windows and inspect the solar panels buried under ice. I clear crystalline buildup from sensors and antenna, scrape ice from mechanical joints, and inspect insulation seams for leaks. I ration fuel for heating and for cooking snow into drinking water. Every action is deliberate, melting water in small batches so as not to exhaust fuel, layering clothes to retain heat, yet avoid sweat that could freeze, pacing battery usage so the radio can broadcast. My station's narrow corridors are lined with salvaged gear, insulated storage of canned foods, long past prime but still edible, packets of dried mushrooms and algae samples I cultivated under LED lights, tools for repairing engines and Sub-Zero, spares of circuit boards and wires brittle from cold. I keep a small hydroponic bay alive beneath grow lights powered intermittently by stored energy, a few sprigs of kale and microgreens that tastes faintly of hope. Tending them reminds me of life's persistence. Even in darkness, something green can break through if cared for. But each sprout also reminds me of fragility, a single power outage, a cracked bulb, and they perish. Venturing outside is perilous. I bundle in layers, thermal base layers, insulating mid-layers, windproof outer shells patched from scavenged fabrics, goggles frost over, gloves stiffen. I carry a backpack with minimal rations, a portable stove, a small toolkit, and an emergency beacon. Snowmobile runs to distant caches are always calculated risks. I plot routes by compass and sun's faint arc, knowing magnetic anomalies can mislead. I navigate shifting ice fields where crevasses hide beneath drifting snow. I have learned to watch subtle signs, patterns in wind-sculpted snow, the angle of ice ridges, faint echoes that hint at hollow spaces beneath. Each return journey feels like a narrow escape from oblivion. Why do I endure? The simplest answer: hope, however flickering, but that word feels inadequate for the complexity within. I survived while many did not. Early on, I scoured recordings, broadcast messages on open frequencies, hoping for contact. When silence answered, guilt gnawed. Was my voice too faint, my transmissions too infrequent? Yet the act of broadcasting became my lifeline, an assertion that someone, somewhere might still be out there. Each day I survive is an act of homage to those I lost. My younger brother who vanished in a storm, my partner whose last message was static and then silence. I keep their memories alive by speaking. I remember you, I honor you, I carry your story forward. Responsibility drives me. This station is one of the few still operational in this frozen expanse. If I abandon it, that beacon dies. Perhaps someone else might find it later. But until then, it remains a solitary outpost in darkness. Broadcasting, survival tips: how to melt ice safely, repair engines in -50 degrees Celsius, secure shelters against wind blasts could save a life. If even one person hears and lives another day, the effort is worth it. Responsibility extends beyond self. It stretches toward an unseen network of survivors. I imagine them tuning in. Someone in a hidden bunker, a wanderer scavenging in distant ruins, a researcher clinging to life in a geothermal cave. My transmissions are threads weaving a fragile web of human connection. Human connection itself fuels me. I crave voices beyond my own echo. When static yields a faint repliprab, a cough, a name whispered, my heart leaps. Even if the signal collapses moments later, the knowledge that another person is out there sparks renewed resolve. Loneliness is a constant companion. Speaking into the void is both solace and torment. I recount personal reflections over the air, memories of laughter around bonfires in summers long gone, the taste of fresh berries, the green glow of forests. I know these recollections may seem fanciful to listeners hardened by survival, yet they remind us of what was and of what could be again. However distant that again may lie, my losses shape every moment. I lost family, my brother's team, got caught in a sudden freeze on an expedition. My partner stayed behind to help others in a camp that succumbed to a storm. Their absence haunts me. I half expect their voices to crackle through static. But days turn to weeks, weeks to months, then years of silence. Guilt surfaces in dreams. I imagine blame if I had chosen differently, if I had sent rescue parties sooner, if I had broadcast more widely. Rationally, I know those storms were unstoppable, that rescue was impossible, yet emotionally regret lingers like frostbite in the soul. I lost my previous identity. Before the collapse, I lectured on climate models, collaborated on research, papers, lived among colleagues and students. Now I barter survival tips with isolated strangers over radio waves. I trade the comfort of human company for fleeting fragments of conversation through static. My hands, once steady at writing formulas or adjusting lab instruments, now battle frostbite and tremor from cold exposure. The instruments I maintain now serve to keep me alive rather than to advance knowledge. Yet I cling to science's guide. I record environmental data daily: temperature trends, wind speeds, ice thickness, barometric pressure, hoping that those logs, preserved on hardened drives, will inform future survivors or archivists. I struggle with despair. There are days when the oppressive silence and endless cold feel like forces conspiring to smother hope. The thought of giving up, ceasing broadcasts, succumbing to despair whispers in the long nights when generator sputters and storms howl against reinforced doors, but I resist. I remind myself despair is the true enemy if I surrender. I relinquish the only things that keep the spark alive: my voice, my actions, my belief that another sunrise, however dim, holds meaning. My background as a climatologist endows me with knowledge crucial to survival. I understand atmospheric patterns and can predict storm onsets by reading subtle shifts in barometric trends. I calibrate instruments to detect pressure changes indicating incoming blizzards. I analyze snow samples for moisture content, advising on safe routes and avalanche risks. I'm adept at improvising repairs, converting old lab heaters into snow melting units, repurposing scientific sensors to monitor generator performance. I rig passive solar collectors from broken reflective panels, capturing weak sunlight to warm small spaces. I design makeshift insulation from layered fabrics and foam salvaged from abandoned buildings. These technical skills sustain me and form the core of the guidance I broadcast. Yet technical acumen alone is not enough. Adaptability is key. I learn from each failure. When a wind turbine blade fractures in a gale, I modify designs. When a hydroponic batch crashes due to power fluctuations, I reconfigure power management. I train my mind to see possibilities in wreckage. A shattered window becomes a lens for a passive heater. Memory chips from a ruined server hold archived research. Cables stripped from abandoned vehicles power small circuits. Resourcefulness becomes survival art. I narrate my inner world with candor. Fear coexists with resolve, sorrow with fleeting moments of awe. In solitary hours, I reflect on how the collapse reshaped priorities. Trivial concerns vanish, replaced by elemental questions: will I survive tonight? How to stretch fuel another week? How to maintain sanity when solitude stretches indefinitely? Yet within this starkness arises clarity. Small acts tending hydroponics, sending a broadcast, repairing a parts become profound gestures of defiance against oblivion. I recall the moment I first realized broadcasting was my purpose. After days without contact, hearing my own recorded voice echo back in static felt like talking to myself in an empty cathedral. Yet I persisted, refining messages, experimenting with frequencies, deciphering faint replies. That persistence carried me through darkest stretches. Now, when I speak, I address both unknown listeners and my own weary self. I say, I am here, I persist, I remember. Those words resonate beyond radio waves. They anchor my psyche. Over time, my emotional state evolves. Initial shock and grief gave way to determination, then to a tempered optimism tempered by realism. I recognize that survival is not a triumph, but an ongoing challenge. I accept that some days bring setbacks: equipment failures, failed foraging runs, missed signals, but also small victories, a successful repair, a clearer weather window, a fleeting reply. These moments become beacons in the long night. I also grapple with trust. When a faint voice claims to be another survivor, I test them with code phrases and data references. Each potential contact evokes hope and wariness. Could it be raiders seeking to ambush? Yet I choose cautious openness. If genuine collaboration could amplify survival chances. If false, I prepare defenses. This tension underscores my broadcasts. I include verification steps, share encryption cues, and advise listeners on vetting encounters. In guiding others, I reinforce my own vigilance and purpose. My identity has shifted to that of observer participant. I document environmental changes but also live them. I broadcast warnings yet also heed them. I study data yet improvise in dire circumstances. I am storyteller and caretaker, relaying survival knowledge, but also weaving narratives that sustain morale. When I speak of memory stories of green summers, laughter around campfires, I acknowledge the world that was but also kindle desire to build something new, something suited to this frozen reality. I have few companions besides the hum of machines and the crackle of radio. but I imagine a network, distant enclaves that might hear my voice. I envision gatherings where survivors share data, pool resources, plan routes across frozen wastes. My broadcasts plant seeds of cooperation. This sense of larger purpose transcends my isolation, though physically alone. I participate in a collective striving for human persistence. I carry talismans of loss, a photograph of my brother pinned to a panel, frost-lined at the edges. A worn journal of my partner's notes on survival tactics. Its pages weathered, I speak their names in quiet moments. For Sarah, for Omar. Their memories infuse my work with meaning. When despair creeps in, I remember their courage, their laughter, and I press on. Grief remains a companion, but it fuels resilience. I live not only for myself, but also in their memory. I am a survivor forged by collapse, once a scientist interpreting climate data, now living its extremes. I survive through skill, resourcefulness, and ritual. Each broadcast, each repair, each rationed meal is an affirmation that I refuse to vanish. What drives me is a blend of hope for contact, responsibility to maintain this outpost as a beacon, and the need to honor memories of lost loved ones. My struggles battling cold, isolation, dwindling supplies. Inner doubts shape my voice, reflective, somber, but underscored by resilient determination. I speak into the Arctic night not because I know someone will answer, but because the act of speaking itself defies silence. In that defiance lies hope, that somewhere someone listens, that knowledge endures, and that, against the frozen void, human connection can persist. I record today's log with deliberate urgency. The crisis is no longer an abstract concept. It is the unrelenting freeze, tightening its grip on every living thing. What began as extreme cold spells has mutated into a near-permanent polar vortex that traps frigid air over vast regions. Survival becomes harder with each passing cycle of cold and storm. I speak directly into the microphone, both to inform any listening survivors and to steel my own resolve against despair. Below, I relay the unfolding crisis, its scientific mechanics, its catastrophic effects on environment and society, and the relentless limitations I face in resources. The tone here must be clear. The situation is dire, and urgency guides every choice. The central disaster is the polar vortex's entrenchment. Historically, the polar vortex formed seasonally, driven by temperature contrasts between the Arctic and mid-latitudes, but as greenhouse gas emissions heated lower latitudes disproportionately, the jet stream weakened and became increasingly meandering. This allowed Arctic air to spill south occasionally, but paradoxically. As the Arctic warmed overall, complex feedback loops led to colder extremes in certain regions. Over the past years, these loops intensified. Melting sea ice reduced albedo, altering circulation patterns. Disrupted ocean currents and stratospheric warming pushed cold air masses into a slow-moving vortex. Now, the vortex stalls over large areas, plunging temperatures to minus 60 degrees Celsius or below for months on end, with only brief unnatural thaws that collapse into sudden refreezes. This is not a typical winter, it is a permanent freeze. An environment that refuses to relent. Atmospheric readings I gather daily show consistently plummeting temperatures. Barometric pressure patterns indicate the vortex's center remains locked overhead, preventing warmer air incursions. The result, wind chills beyond human limits, machinery failing under embrittlement, water locked in unbreakable ice. The crisis is self-reinforcing. Failing systems lead to lost capacity to adapt, and each failure amplifies vulnerability. I model these patterns roughly using my instrumentation, temperature logs, pressure sensors, and wind speed anemometers. The data confirm the vortex's persistence. Weeks pass without significant warming events. In scientific terms, the climate regime has shifted to a new colder equilibrium in these latitudes, one driven by complex interactions between ocean, ice, and atmosphere. The collapse of temperate seasons means ecosystems cannot recover. Agriculture fails globally, and localized refuges must rely on ingenuity and technology. My generator fuel, once stored for emergencies, dwindles faster as cold intensifies. Each degree drop increases heating demands exponentially. The heat loss through insulation follows roughly a gradient. Colder exterior means greater heat flow outward. To maintain even minimal habitable temperatures inside the shelter, I consume more diesel or scavenged fuel. Solar panels produce almost no energy under thick ice and overcast skies. Wind turbines yield intermittent power but risk damage from violent gusts. Batteries degrade faster in extreme cold. Thus, energy scarcity deepens. Heating, communications, water melting, and lighting all draw on the same precarious fuel reserves. Hydroponic experiments yield scant greens under limited power. Root crops in permafrost soils fail entirely. Dried stores from pre-collapse era run low. Foraging outside for wild edibles is futile. Most flora died in earlier heat waves or cannot survive the freeze. Wildlife is nearly extinct or extremely scarce. Only a few hardiest species eke out existence, but tracking and hunting them under storm conditions is near impossible. Long-term nutritional deficits risk weakening immune systems, making survivors susceptible to infection or exposure. Each meal now must be rationed, calories per day reduced to bare minimum, risking muscle atrophy and hypothermia susceptibility. Water exists as ice or snow, abundant but locked in place. Melting requires energy, fuel, or electricity, both scarce. I calculate that melting 1 liter of water demands heating from -30 degrees Celsius to 0 degrees Celsius, then phase change. Each requires kilojoules of energy. With limited fuel, I must melt only minimal amounts daily for drinking, and even then, water purification consumes additional energy or materials, filters, boiling. Dehydration risks multiply when physical exertion increases, but conserving energy often means reducing activity, which in turn affects morale and productivity. Cold embrittles metal and fractures electronics. Generators struggle to start. Lubricants thicken, even insulated wiring cracks. I spend more time repairing or improvising parts. Tools break under strain. Spare parts are scarce. Each repair mission outside risks exposure. Every equipment failure compounds resource limitations. If the generator dies, communications cease. Heating stops, perishables spoil faster, morale plummets, salation and stress degrade mental health. Sleep is disrupted by cold anxiety, nightmares of endless darkness, or the memory of lost loved ones. Chronic stress impairs decision-making. Small errors in rationing or equipment maintenance can have fatal consequences. The emotional weight of responsibility, knowing others might rely on my broadcasts, adds urgency but also stress. Despair can weaken the will to take necessary but dangerous actions, like scavenging missions. Rogue factions and raiders grow desperate. As broadcasts reveal locations of fuel caches or hydroponic shelters, some survivors may be drawn to seek refuge, while others may be drawn by the lure of resources to plunder. Trust becomes a liability. Inviting others could bring help or aggression. Each contact must be vetted through coded exchanges, but false signals can lure me into traps. The threat of violence compounds environmental danger. As days pass, these factors intensify. Fuel reserves shrink, storms grow more frequent and severe. Equipment ages beyond repair, and psychological strain mounts. The crisis is not static, but accelerates. The longer the freeze persists, the harsher it becomes. I must act with urgency to extend survival chances and seek potential refuges or alliances before resources collapse fully. Permafrost, once a stable layer, now alternately thaws. In brief, anomalous warm spells, then refreezes violently. Thawing releases trapped greenhouse gases, methane, CO, and pulses, further destabilizing climate patterns. But in our region, thawed pockets are rare and often immediately refrozen, creating unstable ground prone to sinkholes or collapses. Traversing such terrain risks falling into concealed cavities. Rivers and lakes freeze solid. Flow ceases or becomes subterranean under ice. Aquatic ecosystems collapse. Fish die or hibernate beyond survival. Downstream areas reliant on melt from mountain sea erratic pulses when sudden thaws occur, causing floods that then refreeze. This oscillation wrecks any potential for agricultural irrigation or replenishing freshwater reservoirs. The atmosphere is laden with ice crystals and particulate matter from earlier wildfires and dust storms. Visibility is near zero during storms. Air quality worsens as particulate levels spike when snow cover is disturbed. Respiratory issues mount among survivors lacking filtration equipment. Plant life vanished in most regions. Pollinators extinct locally. No insects or small life forms remain to sustain minimal food webs. Wildlife populations plummet. Only a few species survive in micro-refuges near geothermal vents. Biodiversity loss is near total, eliminating natural sources of food, medicine, or ecosystem services. Government disintegration. Centralized governments collapsed early as crises, cascaded. Food shortages, mass migrations, social unrest, breakdown of law and order. Now no coherent authority exists. Some remnants claim to govern territories around resource caches, but legitimacy is fleeting. Without enforcement or supply lines, these authorities falter quickly. Fragmented communities. Survivors organize into small enclaves, research outposts, geothermal refuges, subterranean bunkers, or mobile caravans. Each enclave operates autonomously, often suspicious of others. Cooperation is challenging across distances due to communication breakdowns and dangers of travel. Resource wars. Competition for fuel, food, water, and equipment spawns conflicts. Raider groups intercept travelers, seize caches, and extort enclaves. Defensive measures, fortifications, patrols, armed watch drain manpower and resources. Time and energy spent on defense reduce capacity for innovation or expansion. Loss of knowledge and infrastructure. Many archives of knowledge are inaccessible. Servers drowned, frozen, or lost. Libraries destroyed in earlier disasters, wildfires. Flood's remaining knowledge is stored in isolated caches, often requiring energy to access. Infrastructure roads, power grids, communication networks lies in ruins or is unusable under ice. Rebuilding such systems seems impossible under current conditions. Cultural erosion with daily survival paramount. Cultural practices fade. Music, art, literature are luxuries few can afford. Oral histories persist in enclaves, but the wider shared culture fragments. Morale suffers as meaning beyond basic survival dwindles. Health crises. Medical facilities are rudimentary. Hypothermia, frostbite, respiratory illnesses from cold and particulate air, malnutrition-related ailments, infections from minor wounds or common, lack of antibiotics, sterile equipment, or trained personnel exacerbate mortality. Mental health crises, depression, anxiety, PTSD go untreated. Communication fracture. Radio remains the primary communication medium, but signals fade under storms and distance. Satellite systems likely defunct or inaccessible. Digital networks offline. Information sharing is slow, unreliable, and dangerous if it reveals locations. Yet without information exchange, enclaves cannot coordinate to share resources or pool knowledge. The combination of environmental devastation and societal collapse forms a feedback loop. Harsher conditions make organization harder. Fragmented communities cannot pool resources effectively. Lack of cooperation accelerates resource depletion and vulnerability to threats. Environmental conditions worsen as human capacity to adapt dwindles. Diesel reserves for generator and snowmobile are nearly exhausted. I scavenge distant caches, but yield is unpredictable and contested. Each liter must be allocated between heating, communications, and transportation. I calculate burn rates meticulously, heating my shelter at minimal safe internal temperature, a -4 degrees Celsius. Above freezing consumes X liters per day. A short broadcast uses Y liters, melting water Z liters. I maintain logs. If I reduce heating periods at night, relying on insulation alone, I save fuel but risk hypothermia and sleep. If I delay a broadcast to conserve energy, I risk losing potential contact. Each decision is a trade-off with life or death consequences. Stored canned goods, dehydrated rations, and hydroponic yields total barely enough for subsistence. I ration calories to minimum, around 1,200 to 1,500 kilocalories per day depending on exertion. Foraging missions might yield marginal supplies, like entrapped rodents near geothermal vents, but risk is high. Nutritional deficiencies, vitamin D, protein, essential fatty acids increase vulnerability. I supplement with algae cultures, but these require energy for lighting and nutrient solutions, which compete with other needs. Melting ice demands fuel or electricity. I schedule melting during generator peaks, collecting only necessary water. Wastewater recycling helps. I reheat and filter used water where possible. I monitor hydration levels carefully. Dehydration symptoms can mimic hypothermia, complicating treatment. Solar panels are largely ineffective under thick ice and low sun angles. Wind turbines break in storms. Geothermal energy is beyond reach without specialized equipment. Batteries degrade rapidly in cold. I store them in insulated boxes near slight heat sources to extend life. Equipment failures, generator breakdowns, broken down snowmobile engines, cracked piping require improvisation, cannibalizing parts from scavenged wrecks, repurposing lab tools, but spares are finite. My outpost shelter holds minimal insulation. Walls are reinforced with scavenged foam and metal plating, but constant temperature differential stresses structure. I patch leaks as frost forms inside walls, risking mold when interior warms. Prolonged storms test structural integrity. Reinforcing exterior requires time and labor, exposing me to cold. I balance time spent on maintenance versus other tasks. Radio transmitter power cycles limited by fuel. Antenna maintenance demands solar work in cold. Storms knock out signals frequently. I store backup batteries and use low-power transmissions, but range shrinks. I implement directional antennas to focus energy toward likely survivor areas, but alignment requires frequent adjustment. Without consistent contact, coordination with others remains speculative. I keep a small stock of antibiotics, antiseptics, and basic bandages, but many medications have expired or run out. I improvise treatments. Topical herbal extracts are unavailable. Cold-related injuries require prevention more than treatment. I wear layered clothing, but frostbite and trench foot risks persist. I monitor myself daily for early signs of cold, injury, but self-treatment is limited. An injury in the field could be fatal. Solitude amplifies stress. I set routines, daily logs, broadcasts, minor creative tasks, writing reflections, or maintaining a small journal to sustain mental health. But monotony and fear of failure press in. I calculate that if isolation persists beyond a certain threshold, mental breakdown could occur. Thus, seeking contact even risky is vital for psychological as well as practical survival. I integrate scientific context and survival tactics into daily broadcasts. aiming to give listeners both understanding and practical guidance. Below are key explanations and actions. The polar vortex is a large-scale cyclonic circulation around the pole, normally strongest in winter, under high greenhouse gas, forcing Arctic amplification. Greater warming at high latitudes weakened the temperature gradient between pole and mid-latitudes. This weakens the jet stream, making it wavier and slower. These wavy patterns allow cold air masses to descend into mid-latitudes, but also can trap cold air over the pole or adjacent regions when the vortex stalls. Feedback loops such as reduced sea ice leading to more heat absorption in summer have altered seasonal cycles, resulting in unexpectedly severe and persistent cold spells. Advice: monitor barometric pressure changes. A sudden rise in pressure at lower latitudes and drop at the pole can signal vortex stabilization overhead. Use portable pressure sensors to forecast major cold events a day or two in advance. When forecasts indicate a deepening vortex, stockpile fuel in insulated containers, secure shelter insulation, and postpone expeditions. Heat loss through walls. Follows Fourier's law, rate proportional to temperature difference between inside and outside, divided by thermal resistance insulation. At extreme external temperatures, for example, minus 60 degrees Celsius, even small leaks cause large heat loss. Reinforced insulation. Layer materials with high R values. Foam panels, layered fabrics, snow-packed barriers to slow conductive heat loss. Seal drafts meticulously. Use tape, putty, or improvised sealants from scavenged materials. Use vestibules or airlocks to minimize heat loss when exiting. When heating, maintain a minimal but steady internal temperature rather than intermittent high heat spikes, which consume more fuel due to greater temperature differential. Combustion efficiency falls in extreme cold if engines or stoves are not preheated. Fuel viscosity increases. Batteries lose capacity in cold, reducing power storage. Advice: preheat generators or engines in insulated enclosures. Use residual heat or small burners to warm engine blocks before starting. Store fuel in insulated containers close to slight heat sources to prevent gelling. For stoves, use wick-based systems or pressure stoves designed for cold. Collect wind energy when feasible, but design turbines with breakaway blades to avoid damage in extreme gusts. Insulate batteries and keep them above critical temperature using waste heat. Conserve energy by prioritizing essential tasks. Heating, sleeping areas at night, cooking minimal water quantities when needed, and scheduling broadcasts during slightly warmer windows if possible. Melting ice requires energy for heating and phase change. Impure ice may contain contaminants. Melt snow rather than thick ice when possible, as snow requires less energy to heat to melting point. Use insulated melt pots to reduce heat loss. Collect snow from clean surfaces, for example. Elevated snowdrifts away from human activity to minimize contamination. Filter melted water through improvised filters, layers of cloth, charcoal from wood fires if available, and boil briefly if fuel permits. Recycle gray water where safe. Capture condensation from heating pipes or waste heat exchangers to reuse for non-potable tasks. I wake to the low hum of the generator and the dull glow of emergency lights. Inside this cramped shelter, the temperature hovers just above freezing. Outside, the wind howls against reinforced walls. Each morning begins the same way, yet the pressure mounts, supplies dwindle, storms grow fiercer, and the world beyond. These walls feels ever more hostile. Today's log must capture the mounting tension, my struggle to stretch resources, the looming threats both environmental and human, and the flicker of a new mystery that might reshape everything or prove another trap. Fuel levels barely register on the gauge. I calculate, at the current burn rate for heating in the next scheduled broadcast, I will have enough for only a week, maybe less, if the generator falters. I ration heat more strictly, lowering the interior temperature at night to just above the frost line, wrapping myself in layered blankets. My bones ache from the cold, yet I dare not let the generator idle longer than necessary. Every liter saved is precious. I schedule broadcasts at times when external temperature is slightly less punishing, but storms are unpredictable. A sudden drop means indoor temperature falls faster than I can react. Food stores shrink. The hydroponic bay yields dwindling. Greens, I adjust light cycles to minimize power draw, but yields drop further. Canned rations remain, but are low in variety and nutrients. I ration calories to the bare minimum, around 1,200 kcal per day, enough to keep me mobile but leaving fatigue in its wake. Each meal is eaten deliberately. I chew slowly, savoring minimal flavor, reminding myself that this small energy must carry me through long foraging runs. The thought of muscle loss terrifies me. In this cold, physical strength is vital for repairs and scouting. Water demands fuel to melt ice. I limit melting to drinking and minimal cooking. I collect condensation from slight warmth around pipes and reuse gray water where safe. Still, dehydration shadows me. My throat often feels slightly parched, a warning I cannot ignore. The act of melting snow now feels like burning precious life. I record the energy cost for each liter, X liters of fuel consumed. I wonder if I can locate a geothermal vent to melt water without burning diesel. The idea surfaces often a hope that tomorrow's expedition might reveal a hidden source. Each resource shortage ratchets up tension. Decisions become stark. Postpone a broadcast to save fuel but risk losing contact. Delay a foraging mission to conserve energy but risk starvation. Ignore a low-power warning on the generator until tomorrow and risk sudden shutdown. I log these choices openly into the microphone. Today I postponed non-essential lighting to extend generator life. I carried only minimal gear on the foraging. Run, knowing the risk of exposure increases when I go light. If I collapse outside, no one will find me. The frankness is my confession and my plea. If someone hears, let them understand the stakes. Rumors of raider activity grow. Yesterday, I intercepted a faint transmission. Voices speaking of ambushing lone travelers near known fuel caches. The tone was ruthless, no mercy for those caught off guard. I replay the recording, heart pounding. Adrenaline surges as I realize how close I am to being targeted. I broadcast a warning. Survivors avoid route to Cache X for the next week. Raider group active. Travel only in groups. At dawn when radar conditions are best, and with decoy signals on alternate frequencies. But broadcasting warnings may reveal that I know of their activity, painting a target on my shelter. Last week, during a scouting run, I encountered signs, footprints, around a cache I visited days earlier. I left a hidden marker for myself. The marker was disturbed. I glimpsed figures at the edge of visibility, silhouettes in heavy gear, watching me before melting into the drifting snow. I froze, heart racing. Did they follow? I doubled back under a false trail I'd prepared, then hid in a snow trench until darkness. I returned to base shaken, convinced they watched for days. Since then, I've altered routines, vary routes, leave false signals to mislead trackers, install cheap motion sensors around the shelter entrance. But paranoia grows. Every sound outside, every shift in snow sets nerves on edge. Inside, I maintain defensive measures, reinforced shutters, improvised tripwires, triggering noise alarms, a cache of improvised explosives from scavenged fuel drums, and wiring last resort deterrents. The tension of potential violence means sleep is fitful. I imagine raiders breaching the shelter, the cold suddenly halted by blinding light and gunfire. I record my fears as warnings. If attacked, I will broadcast a distress signal at high power, hoping nearby survivors hear and assist. But such a signal may alert more raiders. The moral weight of these choices broadcasting for help might endanger others lies heavily on me. I weigh trust and caution. My broadcast ethos urges sharing knowledge, yet sharing location may invite predators. Scant as they are, encounters occur over radio, a faint voice claiming to be from an enclave to the east, seeking collaboration. The signal is unstable. Voices break in static. They mention a small group near geothermal springs in need of technical expertise. I test them with code phrases, details from earlier broadcasts, references to instrument calibrations only genuine listeners could know. Their responses aligned. Discrepancies appear. Slight mismatches in weather observations I shared. Are they poorly disciplined or deceivers probing for my location? I linger on the decision, respond further or ignore. If genuine, alliance could extend resource networks. If false, I risk betrayal. I decide to reply with cautious curiosity, propose a low-stakes information exchange, ask them to send pictures of landmarks via encoded signals, recorded audio descriptions of rock formations, or equipment, serial numbers. They reply with descriptions that match known geothermal features, but also mention anomalies I did not broadcast. This deepens uncertainty. Do they possess local knowledge I lack, or is it a trap to lure me? My inner struggle intensifies. Trust, that offers hope of community. Mistrust preserves safety but sustains isolation. I record this internal debate in a broadcast. I have a potential contact claiming enclave at geothermal site. Their details partially match known data but diverge. In some respects, I must decide whether to attempt a meeting. Listeners, what protocols do you recommend? If anyone within range can verify these coordinates or share experience, respond. I feel absurd asking advice into silence, yet the act affirms connection. However tenuous, storm warnings cascade daily. The barometer plunges unpredictably. Each reading hints at an approaching blizzard. Yesterday, a sudden gale struck mid-repair. I scrambled to secure panels, but a hatch seal failed, letting wind gust inside and icing over the interior. I spent hours chipping frost from walls and drying wet clothing near limited heater output. The strain on fuel was immense. Today, I brace for another storm. I reinforce exterior panels with layered debris, fill gaps with improvised sealant, and stockpile enough fuel to maintain minimal heat through the storm's peak. I broadcast the alert. Expect whiteout conditions for 48 hours. Wind speeds up to 90 kilometers per hour. Secure shelter, minimize power use, and be prepared for potential generator. Downtime, have manual tools and hand-crank lights ready. My voice carries urgency and wariness. The increase in storm frequency and intensity makes planning precarious. A long storm can trap me inside, depleting supplies before I can resume foraging. The storm's onset arrives suddenly. Silence falls. Then a low rumble as wind builds. Inside, the shelter shakes. Every bolt moans under pressure. I light minimal lamps, wrap myself in insulating layers, and monitor the generator's performance, praying it holds. Outside, I hear ice pelting metal, like relentless drums. My thoughts spiral. What if the storm damages the antenna, cutting communications? What if a structural breach floods the shelter with cold? I stave off panic by focusing on tasks, checking fuel valves, adjusting vents to prevent carbon monoxide, recording data for later review. The storm's ordeal lasts longer than predicted, draining resources. After 2 days, the wind eases, revealing a transformed landscape, drifts piled higher, landmarks altered. A path I planned for a scouting run is now buried. I must routes delaying any expedition and prolonging resource strain. Amid this struggle, I detect whispers of a possible new water source, an underground aquifer somehow insulated from the freeze by geothermal warmth. The rumor surfaced from intercepted chatter. A survivalist group spoke of melting ice at a subglacial spring, producing relatively warm water needing less fuel to process. They claimed coordinates deep beneath a glacier tongue. Could it be true? If so, it would revolutionize survival, water without burning diesel. Potential for small-scale greenhouse using geothermal heat. Yet the source's location is uncertain, and the journey perilous, crossing unstable ice fields, navigating crevasses, evading raiders drawn by the same rumor. I analyze the data from my instruments. Nearby geothermal anomalies exist, but mapping is coarse. I lack precise topographical data under ice. The rumor could be wishful thinking or a trap. Raiders might lure desperate survivors into deadly terrain. Yet the thought grips me. If water could be accessed with less fuel, I could extend generator life, increase hydroponic output, perhaps support more people. The potential reward is huge. The risk is near suicidal. I dwell on this mystery day and night, recording my thought process. I feel the pull of hope this could free me from constant fuel-fueled water melting. But the margin for error is minimal. A miscalculated route could strand me. Crevasse collapse could kill me. Raiders might await at the location. I must gather more intel before deciding. I broadcast an open query to any survivors who know of geothermal aquifers under ice. Share findings. Coordinate safe approach. I plan a reconnaissance mission if credible data arrives. Travel alone is too risky. If anyone within range can, form a small, trustworthy team, respond with code Borealis. The broadcast ends, leaving me in suspended anticipation. Each static burst could carry a reply, but silence returns. I wait time. Resources dwindle. Waiting may forfeit the opportunity. The mystery beckons like a mirage in the frozen desert. Trust is a torrent and a drought. The more I broadcast, the higher chance of contact, but contact might invite danger. I reflect on past encounters. The voice claiming an enclave partially matched known data but had inconsistencies. If I trust and venture out, I risk ambush or wasted journey. If I ignore potential allies, I remain isolated. Resources expire. Hope drains. My mind cycles through scenarios. Meeting genuine survivors could create a coalition strong, enough to share resources and knowledge. Meeting raiders could end in death. How to decide? I rely on partial verification. Technical questions only a true collaborator could answer. Yet some raiders might collect intelligence from intercepted broadcasts, learning my methods to feign legitimacy. The tension strains my judgment. Fear and hope war within me. At times, I feel resolve. I will not let terror paralyze me. I will probe cautiously, gathering clues. Other times, doubt overwhelms. Perhaps the mystery is folly. Perhaps my resources should be conserved for known needs, not chasing rumors. I recount these conflicts on air. I struggle with doubt. Hope tempts me toward action. Fear warns me of doom. I record my analysis, weigh fuel costs, probability of genuine intel, potential alliances versus threats. If no credible response by next broadcast, I will postpone mission and instead focus on repairing and reinforcing this. Shelter further, though doing so may still end in slow resource exhaustion. The act of vocalizing illustrates resilience, even amid indecision. I engage rationally and transparently. I set out toward a known cache with a small reserve of fuel and supplies. Midway, I detect radio chatter on a radar frequency, sounding like they coordinate an ambush near the cache. I divert to a less-known route, lengthening the journey. My snowmobile's engine strains. I stop to perform emergency maintenance in sub-zero wind, risking frostbite. I finally reach the cache, find half the fuel stolen, and a crude trap set, a booby-trapped container. I defuse it carefully and take the remaining fuel, grateful but shaken. I log today's run cost me extra fuel and nearly cost my life, but yielded small gain. Raiders adapt. I must adapt faster. A sudden storm knocks out the generator's ignition system. Inside, temperatures drop rapidly. I scramble to repair, remove spark plug, warm engine parts with insulated tent and small stove, improvise replacement from scavenged parts. Hours pass. Cold seeps into bones. I succeed but lose more fuel than planned. The shelter's interior dips near freezing. I record. Every equipment failure now risks death. The margin narrows. I cannot afford these breakdowns, yet cannot prevent all of them. I must prioritize building redundancies. If only I had spare parts or allies to share. Load. A crackle on the radio, a voice using the agreed code word from earlier. They ask about specific instrument calibrations I described weeks ago. The signal fades before I can verify their location. My heart races. Genuine. I reply with another coded question, but the silence returns. For hours, I oscillate between elation and dread. If they respond, I might have an ally. If not, I wasted precious time expecting contact. I record. Each hint of contact fuels both hope and anxiety. I must verify before acting, yet verification itself consumes resources, broadcasts, monitoring, possible rendezvous attempts. The risk-reward calculus becomes sharper with each day. A multi-day blizzard traps me inside. I hunker down on minimal power, running only essential systems. Isolation deepens. No broadcasts possible until fuel stabilizes. During this forced pause, I reflect. Memories of pre-collapsed life surface warm kitchens, laughter, green forests. The contrast heightens my grief and resolve. I sketch a mental plan for a community, how to share knowledge, how to construct better shelters, how to organize supply chains across enclaves. These visions sustain me, even if they may never materialize. Imagining them wards off despair. I record in my journal in isolation. I build mental maps of future possibilities. These visions are fragile but necessary without them. The cold would freeze my spirit. Another rumor reaches me via intercepted chatter, a hidden research. Bunker with salvageable technology battery cells resistant to cold, prototype heat exchangers, genetic samples for hardy crops, coordinates approximate, buried in cryptic code. The idea tempts me. If real, these items could transform survival prospects here or for allied enclaves. But the location is deep within contested territory, patrolled by raiders. I analyze. Fuel, needed for journey. Probability the bunker remains intact. Risk of booby traps or hostile occupants. Detention tightens. Chase the rumor, or conserve all resources for immediate survival. I decide to broadcast anyone with verified knowledge. Of technology cache, respond with validation codes. I will not embark without credible confirmation. Silence greets me, but I know the broadcast might reach someone scanning frequencies. As days pass, the tension builds toward a decision point. Resources are at critically low levels, less than 5 days of fuel for heating and minimal broadcasts. Remain food stores enough for a week at meager rations. Water reserves are frozen in containers but require fuel to process. The window for safe travel narrows. Approaching winter intensifies storms. Navigation becomes more hazardous as winds reshape snowdrifts unpredictably. If I wait longer, any expedition toward rumored refuges or caches will likely fail or end in death. If I go now, I might secure resources or find allies but might also vanish in the blizzard or fall into a trap. My internal struggle crescendos, the conflict between clinging to known risks at the shelter and embracing the unknown. Dangers of a journey. I map possible routes, calculate fuel needs, consider splitting trips with cached fuel drops along the way requiring multiple partial journeys. I record these plans aloud. Option A, short-range scouting to verify local geothermal warm spots within 50 kilometers using minimal fuel, hoping to find water source. Option B, long-range expedition to rumored aquifer 300 kilometers away requires collaboration or hidden caches. Option C, remain until forced evacuation, hoping rescue or improvement in conditions, but risk starvation and generator failure. Each option carries near equal risk. Time runs out. I pause, breathing heavy in the cold air. The generators hum, a reminder of dwindling lifeline. I broadcast this dilemma. Survivors, I face critical decision. If anyone in proximity can share credible intel on geothermal water source or technology cache, respond within 24 hours. If silent, I will attempt local scouting mission to identify thermal anomalies nearer to reduce fuel cost. I welcome any volunteers for joint missions. Solo journeys risk everything. I record all parameters so that if I fail, others may learn. My reasoning. The broadcast ends. I wait, eyes fixed on the radio's static glow. The silence stretches each ticking second, amplifying anxiety. In the hours that follow, static crackles incessantly. I listen for patterns, a faint tone at odd intervals suggesting someone testing frequencies. My heart races. I decode a brief Message, a single word, confirm. It uses the code we agreed long ago. My breath catches. I reply with a verification phrase only known to genuine listeners. A reference to a specific pressure, reading from weeks prior and a detail about the hydroponic bay repairs. Moments later, another response, coordinates within 50 kilometers pointing to a thermal anomaly detected by someone with portable sensors. The signal fades before more detail arrives. Relief and dread coalesce, a potential ally with real data, but the information is partial and undefined. The location is within range for a short scouting mission, fuel cost manageable. But is it genuine or a trap? I replay the messages, cross-check with my logs. The pressure reference aligns. The hydroponic detail matches my broadcast. This suggests authenticity. The coordinates correspond to an area with potential geothermal geology on old maps. The mystery deepens. Is this someone truly out there, or skilled deceivers? Yet the risk seems lower than a long expedition. If I find a thermal pocket, it could supply water and maybe warmth for a small outpost, extending survival dramatically. The tension peaks. I must choose whether to act on this tip. The rising action builds on compounding pressures, dwindling resources, raider threats, ambiguous survivor contacts, brutal storms, and rumors of life-saving refuges or caches. Each challenge amplifies the stakes. Every decision could extend survival or hasten death. The protagonist's internal struggle, trust versus caution, hope versus pragmatism, drives the narrative forward. The unknown thermal anomaly presents a tangible next step, a quest that may yield water and warmth or lead to ruin. As I finalize this section of the log, the tension is taut. I prepare for the imminent scouting mission, equipping gear, calculating fuel margins, and mentally bracing for the journey. I record my resolve. Tomorrow at first light, or as soon as conditions permit, I depart for the indicated coordinates. I carry minimal gear to conserve fuel, but enough supplies to last several days. I will leave a hidden cache along the route in case I must return or be followed by allies. If successful, I will broadcast findings and invite collaboration for establishing a new outpost. If not, I record details for others to avoid the route. I step into the unknown because staying here means certain collapse. Hope may be fragile, but action must follow it. I move forward at dawn. The tension is at its peak, the moment before the journey, when every fiber of fear and hope intertwines. The rising action ends with that decision in place, setting the stage for the climax to follow. I depart at first light, or what passes for lighter pale gray glow, barely distinguishing sky from ice. The air is minus 55 degrees Celsius, and every breath feels like shards of glass in my lungs. I set out alone on the snowmobile, following the coordinate gleaned from the faint, rarefied transmission. My sled carries minimal supplies, just enough fuel for a round trip if all goes well. A small toolkit, emergency rations that barely sustain me, and a portable stove for melting ice. I stash a hidden cache of extra fuel and sachets of melted water packets halfway along the route in case I need to return or rendezvous with allies. The tension is a knot in my stomach. Succeed, and I secure a crucial resource. Fail, and I risk vanishing into the void. The landscape shifts as I travel. Wind-sculpted drifts rise and fall like frozen waves. Distant ridges of ice glint under the weak light. I navigate by compass and sun angle, constantly checking against my mental map. Each kilometer passed feels like stealing time from an unforgiving clock. I recall earlier foraging runs. Every time I ventured out, storms nearly swallowed me. Now, with fewer reserves, the stakes are higher. Yet I press on, driven by the slim hope of a water source that might change everything midway. The snowmobile sputters a warning. I stop, heart pounding, and warm the engine block in an insulated tent pitched just long enough to coax it back to life. The delay costs precious fuel and minutes in the rising wind. I note in my log, engine hiccup under extreme cold. Emergency. Preheat procedures save the run but consumed extra fuel. Margin now tighter, must proceed without further setbacks. I shove off again, adrenaline steadying my hands on the controls, approaching the coordinates. The terrain becomes unpredictable. Ice ridges fracture the smooth expanse, and crevasses yawn hidden beneath thin snow bridges. I proceed on foot for greater caution, dragging the sled behind. The wind picks up, swirling fine particles that sting my face even through layered protection. I pause to scan for landmarks, a partially exposed rock formation mentioned in the transmission through swirling snow. I make out a dark Schaefer crude marker perhaps, left by whoever sent the message. Relief and apprehension surge, proof I'm on track. Yet the marker could be a trap. I press on carefully, marking my own breadcrumb trail in the snow. A low hum resonates beneath my boot seat. I crouch and clear snow from a patch of ice. Faint steam rises from a fissure. My heart hammers a geothermal vent. The air near the fissure is less cold. I measure temperature with a handheld sensor. Readings show several degrees above ambient, enough to melt ice with less fuel. This is at a hidden source of warmth and water. I record, thermal anomaly confirmed. Heat vents, here potential for shelter or water melting without burning diesel. elation and exhaustion mix. This discovery could extend my life and that of others immeasurably, but the moment is tenuous. As I kneel, I detect footprints around the fissure recent, boot treads matching heavy gear. I realize I am not alone. Did the message come from someone here, allies, or did raiders lure me into a trap? My thoughts flash. If raiders lie in wait, they could ambush me or claim this resource exclusively. I weigh options. Retreat now to plan with allies, but returning risks losing the resource to others first. Push forward and secure a claim, but alone I may not defend it. I take a deep breath, forcing calm first. Inspect immediate area for signs of danger. I circle the fissure, checking for hidden shelters or crude encampments. I spot a makeshift lean-to half buried in snow, built from metal scraps and insulated panels. Inside I find minimal supplies, empty water containers, a few fuel canisters, and a notebook with jottings about the vent. The notebook entries read like a survivor's log. They discovered the vent weeks ago, melted limited water, but lacked means to extract heat safely or defend the site. Their last note warns of an approaching group and specified. I realize someone found this place before but left. Did they flee raiders or whether... The notebook ends abruptly. My pulse quickens. I hold up the pages to record them in my own log. This knowledge may guide future management of the site. Suddenly, a sound-muted crunch of snow beyond the lean-to. I freeze, strained to hear. Wind masks most noises, but I catch a faint scraping. I retreat into the lean-to's shadow, heart pounding, gripping moments later, a figure emerges, bundled in layered gear, face partially obscured by goggles and scarf. They freeze at seeing me, then speak in a cautious tone. Broadcaster. My pulse surges. A real person. I respond. Yes, who are you? They remove gloves, revealing a small emblem, a makeshift insignia linked to the enclave I contacted earlier. Relief washes over me, genuine ally. Yet I remain alert, scanning for others. They introduce themselves. Rami, a scout from a fledgling enclave that detected my broadcasts and verified my credentials. They came here weeks ago, sought to secure water for their group, but lacked technical know-how to set up sustainable systems. They retreated when storms threatened, planning to return with help. Their presence confirms the resource's existence and introduces new dynamics. I am not alone, but cooperation becomes possible. However, I must choose. Partner with them to develop the site, or claim it solely and risk isolation. My internal reckoning intensifies. We converse briefly, sharing data. Their sensors confirm stable geothermal flow, but vents unpredictable. Water emerges intermittently, sometimes mixed with toxic gases requiring filtration. They lack proper filters or energy resources to power pumps continuously. I realize the challenge harnessing the vents safely demands engineering solutions. I partially understand but cannot fully implement alone. Together we might improvise passive heat exchangers, design insulation shelters near the vent, and create filtration systems using scavenged materials. Collaboration promises greater survival odds, but requires sharing limited resources and trust before decisions solidify. The sky darkens as sudden pressure drops signals an impending storm. We must act quickly. Rami suggests retrieving their group's equipment cached nearby. I weigh fuel and time. More trips increase exposure but leave gear unused, risks endless delays. The storm will arrive within hours. I decide. We will work swiftly to set up a temporary heat tent near the vent to melt water manually and test filtration, using minimal fuel, then retreat to base to fetch more supplies with allies. Rami agrees, and we scramble to improvise. We erect an insulated tent frame from scavenged panels, position a small burner to pilot initial melting, and use layered cloth filters and charcoal from cached supplies to filter water. We draw a few liters enough to test. The taste is metallic but drinkable. Triumph ripples through me. We've secured proof of concept. But the storm's roar rises, wind roars like a beast. Snow lashes the tent. I check fuel levels, enough for one short melt cycle but not for extended operations. I log storm approaching faster than predicted. We have initial water samples but long-term extraction requires more equipment and energy. We must plan a larger expedition with more supplies. I will broadcast this to potential allies. For now we evacuate equipment to a hidden cache under the snow, marking its location for retrieval after the storm as we dismantle makeshift gear. The storm hits whiteout conditions. We navigate by compass back to the snowmobile. The wind nearly knocks us over. I cling to Ramai's tethered line. Each step feels like defying death. We reach the lean-to briefly to collect remaining gear. I find the notebook and retrieve it. Outside, the storm intensifies. Visibility drops to near zero. We mount the snowmobile, but the engine sputters again. I warm it urgently. Then we set off blind, guided only by compass heading and faint glow from shelters in the distance. The wind threatens to shove us off course into hidden crevasses. Every moment is razor-edge peril. I recall all earlier forays. This is worse fuel, lower, storm fiercer, stakes higher. Mid-journey. The snowmobile dies. We are stranded in white emptiness. Cold bites through layers. Rami's eyes reflect fear. I face a pivotal choice. Attempt to warm the engine and restart here consuming precious fuel, or proceed on foot to a known cache 20 kilometers away. Abandoning the snowmobile. Restarting risks using too much fuel with low chance of success. Trekking on foot risks exhaustion and exposure. I weigh the cached supplies might save our lives, but the trek under storm is nearly suicidal, yet if we stay, we freeze. I decide, abandon snowmobile, salvage minimal gear, and head on foot with a tethered rope and emergency beacon. I prioritize carrying the water samples and notebook for later planning. Rami protests but accepts. We set directional beacons to mark our path and carry spare fuel for melting snow if we survive the trek. We push into the storm. Each step is agony, knee-deep snow. Gale force winds pushing us backward. I ration our pace to conserve energy. My breaths come in sharp gasps. Frost creeps on exposed skin. I reflect. This moment crystallizes the turning point, my choice to trust and collaborate. Risking everything for potential communal benefit, and now facing possible death for that choice. The inner reckoning echoes. Earlier I feared isolation. Now I choose solidarity even if it might cost my life. My will to survive is tempered by commitment to others. If I perish, I leave records and data that might guide future survivors. If we succeed, we secure a lifeline for Rami's enclave and mine. Hours pass in agonizing struggle. I lead with compass and occasional beacon checks, guiding us toward the cache. At one point, Rami slips toward a hidden crevasse. I grasp their arm, preventing a fall that could have ended us. That moment cements our bond. Survival depends on mutual trust, not solitary resolve. We press on until our legs tremble, but finally, through blizzard's veil, we sight the cache marker, half-buried barrel with spare fuel, emergency rations, and filter materials. Relief floods us. We dive into the small shelter we erect around it, melting snow with a tiny burner to sip warm water and recover. I know depleted energy, but a triumphant spark. We have succeeded in reaching supplies and proving the vent's value. The turning point is realized. Discovery of the vent, forging of alliance, near-death ordeal, and crucial data and resources secured. Inside that makeshift shelter, I reflect on past decisions. Broadcasting into the void led to this contact. My choice to trust partial signals brought us here. My scientific knowledge enabled initial testing. My resource calculations drove careful preparation. I confront the costs. If we had failed, we would be dead, yet the risk yielded reward. I recognize that survival now means interdependence, no longer just my struggles, but shared burdens and shared hope. As storm rages outside, we plan next steps, return to our respective bases with this proof of concept, rally more allies, gather equipment to establish a semi-permanent outpost near the vent. We sketch designs for a larger insulated shelter, passive heat exchangers utilizing geothermal flow, solar collectors for occasional light, wind turbines designed to survive gusts. We document filtration systems for water and means to guard the site against raiders, early warning sensors, coded signals, perhaps a small guard post. Our voices jitter with exhaustion and excitement. The future, though perilous, now holds a tangible lifeline. The climax resolves in both discovery and choice. The crucial resource geothermal vent with water found, but only through a perilous journey and the decision to trust another. The life or death moment on the storm-swept ice cements the protagonist's transformation from isolated broadcaster to collaborative survivor leader. The scene carries urgency. We must act quickly to harness the vent before storms or rivals claim it. Yet there is cautious optimism grounded in hard-won data and shared resolve. In that moment, as we huddle by the small burner in the cache shelter, I articulate my personal reckoning into my recorder. I chose to leave isolation, to follow a rumor into the void, trusting a stranger. I nearly died, but we found water and warmth beyond my station's bleak confines. This turning point shifts everything. Survival becomes communal. Knowledge becomes our currency. Hope becomes actionable. I accept the risks inherent in collaboration because solitary endurance cannot build a future. From here on, I commit not just to broadcasting warnings, but to forging networks, to sharing expertise and burdens. The vent's warmth is a symbol. Even in the frozen apocalypse, life's spark can endure when we face danger together. This moment defines my path, from lone voice in the tundra to a link in a chain of survivors. May this log guide others who follow, warning them of perils and inspiring them to seek connection amid the cold. The storm's howl underscores my words. The climax stands. Discovery, near-death trial, crucial choice, and the protagonists. Renewed purpose. Everything now pivots on how we build on this moment. Forging alliances, defending the vent, and leveraging science and solidarity to carve a fragile sanctuary in the ice. The turning point is both an ending of isolation and the beginning of a larger struggle, a new chapter born from the frozen abyss. I return to the shelter with Rami as the storm fades. The cached supplies and water samples had proven the vent's value, but our ordeal left us drained. Inside, I stoked the small stove, melting snow for warmth as I unpacked the sparse haul, a few liters of water, spare parts salvaged from the cache, and the notebook detailing earlier attempts to harness the vent. The generator holds just enough fuel for one final broadcast tonight. After that, we must rely on this new water source and plan further expeditions. The immediate crisis eased at least I know a way to obtain water without burning diesel butt. A new phase of challenges begins. This is the aftermath of the climax. Relief and fresh urgency entwined. My choice to trust Rami and pursue the vent nearly cost us our lives, yet yielded a tangible lifeline. The outcome is neither unalloyed triumph nor utter defeat. We secured proof of a sustainable water source, but at the expense of precious fuel, physical exhaustion, and the knowledge that defending and developing the site demands resources and cooperation. Returning to our separate bases, we carry this knowledge like a beacon. For me, the shelter's immediate threat of dehydration lessens. I can allocate remaining diesel to heating and communications rather than water melting. For Rami's enclave, this could mean avoiding dangerous foraging for scarce water, improving their food production and extending survival. Yet the burden of mobilizing further missions looms large, gathering materials to build semi-permanent facilities at the vent, establishing defenses, and coordinating multiple survivor groups. All under the specter of storms and raiders. In the days following our return, I recalibrate routines. My shelter, once on a countdown fueled by limited diesel, now has a reprieve. I cut fuel use on water melting almost entirely, relying on portable stoves only for initial testing. I turn the generator briefly for broadcasts and essential heat. Rest of the time, I bundle layers and rely on insulation. The hydroponic bay, once starved of energy, gains slightly, freed from melting duties. I redirect small power surges to the grow lights, coaxing a few extra It is a modest gain, but each leaf tastes like progress. I repair equipment with renewed focus, knowing I might soon need to transfer technology to a field outpost at the vent. I catalog spare parts, reinforce tools, and compile instructions in my logs for constructing passive heat exchangers and basic filtration units. Emotionally, the return stirs mixed feelings. Relief washes over me, but fatigue and lingering fear remain. I replay scenes of the storm-stricken trek, how close we came to succumbing. In quiet moments, I feel tremors of anxiety. What if our discovery becomes known to raiders before we can fortify the site? What if further expeditions fail? Yet alongside fear lies a spark of confidence. I proved my capacity to act decisively, under dire duress, and I forged an alliance born of shared hardship. This duality shapes my reflections. The aftermath is a delicate balance between cautious optimism and sober realism. Having faced near-death among shifting ice and gale winds, I feel changed. Before, my broadcasts felt like solitary gestures against the void. Now, I understand the power of connection. Reaching out, verifying signals, and trusting another human being propelled me to this discovery. My identity as lone broadcaster shifts. I am now a node in a nascent network of survivors, carrying responsibilities not just for myself, but for others. This weight feels heavier but also meaningful. I reflect on earlier isolation's toll. Solitude honed my technical skills and resolve, but bred fear and indecision when facing complex cooperative tasks. The climax forced me to confront vulnerability, acknowledging I needed Rami's help and accepting the risk of collaboration. In that crucible, I gained confidence in my judgments and empathy for the shared struggle of survival. I also reflect on grief, memories of lost loved ones, my brother, my partner linger like ghosts. Their absence once haunted me with guilt. For surviving alone, now, I channel that grief into building something that honors their memory. If this vent can sustain a community, their stories live on within a collective future. I imagine them listening to my broadcasts, perhaps smiling at this effort to transform isolation into solidarity, the personal reckoning. Survival is not merely about continuing breath, but about forging purpose from loss and sharing it with others. The broader environment shows no immediate recovery. The polar vortex remains entrenched. Storms continue to swirl with ruthless intensity. Ice fields shift unpredictably. Snowfall and drift patterns keep altering maps, yet in the microcosm of the vent site, a subtle change emerges. The geothermal warmth creates a pocket where ice thaws into water, enabling basic hydration and modest plant experiments. This micro-refuge is a fragile anomaly in the frozen expanse. It illustrates that pockets of life can persist even when the larger world remains hostile. I note in my logs, while global temperatures may slowly adjust over eons, our immediate concern is localized adaptation. The vent does not herald a thaw of the entire region. It is not a reversal of the frozen apocalypse, but a foothold, a niche. I reflect on this. Hope must be rooted in realistic scale. Dreaming of widespread recovery distracts from the urgent work of sustaining small communities. My scientific mind accepts that environmental recovery, if any, lies far beyond current reach. But human adaptation can carve sanctuaries where life endures. This tempered view guides my strategy. Focus on practical steps to harness the vent for water and modest agriculture, rather than chasing illusions of restoring pre-collapse climate. After the climax, I prioritize extending connections. I broadcast detailed reports, data on the vent's location using coded references to deter raiders, tested methods for setting up temporary heat shelters, filtration prototypes built from scavenged materials, and recommended protocols for defense. I invite survivors within range to share resources or expertise. Metal fabricators, engineers, medics, artisans who might improve the outpost. Some responses trickle in. Voices cautious but curious. Transmissions that verify prior knowledge. Slowly I begin mapping a network of enclaves and lone survivors willing to coordinate. Each contact brings hope and new logistical puzzles. How to share scarce fuel for expeditions. How to vet newcomers. How to allocate workloads fairly. I convene a radio town hall broadcast, a scheduled session where participants identify themselves with code phrases, share needs and capabilities, and propose collaborative missions. The turnout is small but significant. 3 separate survivor groups express interest. We agree on preliminary plans to send small teams to the vent site once more, carrying tools and materials to build a semi-permanent structure and insulated shelter with passive heating channels, storage for water and supplies, and watch posts for early warning of raiders. This network is nascent and precarious. Coordinating across hundreds of kilometers in a frozen wasteland under unpredictable storms tests every communication tool. But the act of planning together transforms solitary survival into collective endeavor. It strengthens morale and pools scarce resources. Even as hope grows, threats persist. I analyze potential raider responses. Once news of the vent spreads, hostile groups may attempt to seize it. I discuss with allies how to camouflage signs of human activity near the vent. Bury footprints in shifting snow, use false heat signatures, rotate watch schedules. We plan for secret supply caches along routes, marked with coded signals known only to trusted parties. We develop guided protocols, approaching the site only during windows of low storm risk, traveling in small groups for stealth and safety, carrying minimal gear on each trip to reduce detection. I record these strategies in manuals to be shared among survivors as a blueprint for resilient cooperation. Environmental threats remain unpredictable. The vent's flow may fluctuate. Seismic activity could alter its dynamics. Storms could bury access points under deep snow or collapse makeshift structures. I schedule periodic monitoring missions. Small teams with portable sensors to track temperature, gas emissions, and structural stability around the vent. We build simple shelters above ground for temporary lodging, using insulated panels and reflective barriers to trap heat. Each mission is perilous, but necessary. Vigilance transforms the vent from a fleeting find into a sustainable resource in these days after the climax. I ponder what survival means now. The initial drive to endure for its own sake has evolved. Survival now encompasses forging connections, sharing knowledge, and constructing fragile hope amid ruin. I realize that the purpose of my broadcasts extends beyond mere tips. They embody solidarity. Each transmission is a thread, linking isolated hearts against the frozen darkness. The vent discovery is symbolic. A warmth emerging under crushing cold mirrors the potential for human warmth cooperation, empathy to arise in dire circumstances. I think of the risk I took, leaving shelter alone, trusting a faint signal, braving the storm. Those actions illustrate that courage tempered by careful planning can yield breakthroughs. Yet I also recognize that not every risk pays off. Many survivors perish chasing rumors. The difference lies in preparation, verification, and willingness to collaborate. I resolved to document these lessons meticulously, to create manuals on risk assessment, expedition planning, alliance formation, and technology improvisation under extreme conditions. Even if I never personally use them, future survivors might. This archival impulse roots my existence in a lineage beyond my lifespan, building knowledge for those who may follow. I also reflect on grief's role. The pain of loss sharpened my empathy and drive to build community. Without grief, perhaps I would not value connection so deeply. I honor my loved ones by dedicating efforts to collective survival, ensuring their memories live on in every shared protocol and every sapling grown with vent-warmed water. Observing the wider environment, I record subtle signs. Storms remain as fierce as ever. Ice continues to shift unpredictably, yet occasional anomalies appear. Faint warming trends in geothermal pockets, minor localized thaws where vents release heat to surface layers. Such micro-refuges may be rare, but critical as nodes for human settlements. I conceive a decentralized network of such refuges, small outposts near vents or other heat sources, connected by radio and occasional expeditions, each self-sufficient in water and modest food production, sharing knowledge and supporting each other when storms allow travel. This model accepts that large-scale environmental recovery is unlikely soon. Instead, humanity adapts by clustering in islands of warmth within the frozen sea. Whether such a network can scale remains uncertain, but the idea guides my priorities. Search for vents, map them, share data, and build resilient micro-communities. I also note risks of environmental deterioration. Thawing permafrost pockets might suddenly refreeze, causing ground collapse. Seismic shifts could alter vent flows. Unpredictable methane releases might pose hazards. Thus, any plan must incorporate monitoring and adaptability. I install sensors near the vent to log changes, archiving data for future analysis. The environment remains indifferent. Human efforts must be vigilant and flexible. As weeks pass, modest progress emerges. A small outpost near the vent begins to take shape. Constructed by combined survivor teams over multiple trips, we build insulated walls, a rudimentary heat chamber, and secure water storage. Hydroponic experiments under vent-warmed lights yield small harvests. Each success feels monumental, a sign that life can persist and even inch forward. Yet the uncertainty remains. Will raiders locate and attack the outpost? Will storms sever communication or destroy structures? Will the vent's flow continue steady or diminish unexpectedly? These unknowns temper optimism with vigilance. Hope is no longer naive exuberance, but a commitment to ongoing effort and adaptability. I broadcast periodic updates, successes, challenges, lessons learned. I emphasize that this endeavor is not a guarantee of comfort or permanence, but an experiment in adaptation. I encourage other survivors to seek their own refuges where possible, share findings, and prepare for cooperation or mutual aid. Each broadcast affirms that though the world remains frozen and perilous, human ingenuity and solidarity can carve out pockets of life. In the aftermath of the climax, I stand at the threshold of a new chapter. The vent's discovery shifted my trajectory from isolated survival to collaborative projects, from merely enduring to building fragile sanctuaries. My mindset has evolved. I accept that no single person can endure indefinitely alone. Community, even small and scattered, is essential. I embrace the paradox that vulnerability trusting others, risking exposure can yield strength when balanced with caution and planning. I remain realistic about the environment. No miraculous thaw is on the horizon. Storms and cold remain constant adversaries. But within that reality, human action can create niches of stability. I record, we may never reclaim the world that was, but we can sculpt new worlds suited to the frozen present. Our task is to find and connect these niches, share knowledge, and remain vigilant. This purpose sustains me. Each day's labors repairing equipment, tending hydroponics, organizing expeditions, broadcasting insights fortify a network of resilience. The aftermath thus comprises both quiet labor and reflective clarity. I have found hope grounded in tangible achievements. Water from the vent, growing greens, forging alliances. Yet I remain aware that the struggle continues. My internal change is profound. I have shifted from fearing isolation to embracing interdependence. From viewing survival as a solo battle to seeing it as a collective journey. I carry this insight into every broadcast and every gathering of survivors. As I close this section of the log, I imagine listening souls tuning in across the frozen expanse. I speak softly but firmly. The world remains harsh, and tomorrow may bring new trials. But we have proven that even in this frozen apocalypse, we can find warmth and life. We can learn, adapt, and support one another. Let this outpost by the vent be a symbol, where hope is not denial but action, where solidarity tempers fear. Continue to seek knowledge, share resources, and tend the fragile sparks of community. The aftermath of crisis is not an end, but a continuation. We rebuild not what was, but what must be a network of resilience amid ice. As long as we breathe and broadcast, we remain alive, together. With that, I save the recording and prepare for the next day's work, carrying forward the lessons of the climax into the ongoing struggle of survival. I sit before the microphone one final time in this log, aware that these words may drift into static or reach ears hungry for connection. The cavern's warmth surrounds me, steam rising faintly from the geothermal pipes, but beyond this refuge lies the same frozen expanse that shaped my journey. As I prepare this conclusion, I feel both relief for what we have achieved and weight for what remains undone. The world has not healed. The polar vortex still clenches the land, storms still roar without mercy, and resources still dwindle in many places. Yet within that frozen reality, pockets of warmth and solidarity now exist, small sanctuaries carved by human determination. This ending is neither triumph nor defeat, but a bridge between what has been endured and what must continue. Hope is fragile here. I know that better than anyone. The discovery of the geothermal vent and the fledgling outpost we built stand as proof that life can persist against the odds. But I also know how fast fortunes can reverse. A sudden storm might collapse our structures, raiders might learn our location, or the vent's flow could shift unexpectedly. I have witnessed near that turned into small victories, and small victories that almost became disasters. Yet these experiences taught me that hope cannot be naive. It must be grounded in constant vigilance, adaptability, and cooperation. When I look at the hydroponic trays glowing dimly under vent-warmed lights, I feel a quiet triumph greens grown. In winter's heartbutt, I also remember how tenuous that growth is. One power failure, one blocked vent, and they could perish. This tension between celebration and caution defines the delicate hope I carry. In these concluding moments, I reflect on the person I was at the journey's start. Isolated, broadcasting into emptiness, armed with technical knowledge but burdened by grief and fear. I remember the nights when my only companion was the generator's hum and the ghostly memory of lost loved ones. Back then, surviving meant keeping the station alive, rationing fuel, and hoping someone heard my voice. Now, survival means something more, participating in a nascent network of survivors, collaborating to build refuges, sharing knowledge, and shouldering collective responsibility. My identity shifted from lone broadcaster to coordinator of fragile alliances. I have learned that solitude sharpens resolve, but can also blind one to opportunities that require multiple hands. Trust once a scarce resource became my choice and risk, yielding both vulnerability and strength. The aftermath of our discovery propelled me into new roles: planner of expeditions, teacher of improvised engineering, chronicler of evolving protocols, and advocate for cooperation. Each role carries its own anxieties, weighing the risk of sharing knowledge against the danger that it may attract hostile attention, balancing immediate needs with long-term strategies, guiding others through decisions I once faced alone. I have faced the cost of trust when the storm nearly claimed us on the trek back from the vent. I have savored the reward when allied teams arrived with tools to expand our shelter. In these experiences, I found meaning beyond mere survival. The act of building something together, of exchanging skills and stories, became proof that humanity endures, not by living in isolation, but by forging bonds, even in the coldest darkness. Yet I do not pretend we have arrived at safety or stability. The frozen world remains indifferent. Climate patterns beyond our reach still rage. Resources outside our micro-refuges remain scarce, and the larger landscape offers no easy passage. My final message must acknowledge that ongoing struggle. Survival is not a destination, but a continuous process. Each day brings new challenges, storms to weather, equipment to maintain, alliances to nurture, and new unknowns to confront. There is no final victory over the polar vortex, only moments when we carve out breathing spaces. These spaces matter. They sustain life, preserve knowledge, and cultivate hope. But we must accept that complacency is fatal. The effort to sustain refuges, to monitor environmental shifts, to guard against threats, to innovate with limited materials, all this must continue as long as breath remains. Looking ahead, I see a patchwork of potential, other geothermal pockets waiting to be found, hidden caches of technology yet to be uncovered, small survivor enclaves yearning for contact. My logs and broadcasts now form a map of these possibilities: coordinates, survival protocols, engineering sketches, verification codes for trustable. I imagine travelers tuning in, using this guidance to navigate the frozen wastes, forging new outposts or reinforcing existing ones. Perhaps they will discover other pockets of warmth, forming nodes in a vast network of refuges. Perhaps they will build durable structures, refine energy extraction methods, or devise ways to cultivate more substantial food supplies under vent-warmed environments. These dreams may be realized incrementally over years, decades, or longer, and perhaps not at all in some regions. But by documenting every lesson learned, every setback, and every small triumph, I sow seeds for future efforts. My final broadcast will be both an instruction manual and a plea: instruction in practical tactics, insulation, water extraction, foraging near vents, defensive strategies, equipment improvisation, and plea for solidarity. If you hear this, you are not alone. Share what you have learned, heed what you hear from others. Form small teams, coordinate routes and caches, protect one another against raiders, monitor environmental changes and share data, cultivate hope in action, not in wishful thinking. I enunciate these words with a voice seasoned by frost and tempered by empathy. The frozen world demands both caution and courage, science and compassion. I also confront the emotional residue, grief for those lost, fear for those still out there, and love for the fragile community we nurture. I honor my brother, my partner, and countless others whose voices now live on in these transmissions. Their memory is not a weight that drags me down, but a beacon guiding each decision to risk for collective benefit, to speak truths even when they reveal dire circumstances, and to record every insight for those who follow. I no longer broadcast solely to hear another voice. I broadcast to amplify many voices, to weave a tapestry of shared humanity in a world stripped of color and warmth. In this concluding reflection, I acknowledge the paradox that hope shines brightest against the darkest backdrop. The frozen apocalypse offers no guarantees, yet within it we have carved flickers of life, each plant grown under vent-warmed lights, each alliance forged across miles of ice, each tool improvised from wreckage. Each data log preserved on hardened drives these are testaments to resilience. They do not signal that the world will return to what it was. Rather, they signify that humanity can adapt to what it has become. We accept that the environment may not relent for generations, but we refuse to let that reality extinguish our drive to live, to learn, and to connect. As I conclude this log, I record a final scene. Dawn's pale glow filtering through frost-cracked windows, the quiet hiss of water dripping as we melt vent-supplied water, the murmur of voices in makeshift workshops, and the soft hum of improvised turbines capturing occasional winds. In this microcosm, life pulses despite the vast cold beyond. I feel the weight of responsibility to maintain this refuge, to share its lessons, to support emerging networks, to remain vigilant and adaptable. I also feel a profound gratitude for the chance to turn isolation into collaboration, for the opportunity to channel grief into purposeful action, and for every small victory that affirms life's tenacity. My final message, then, is this. The struggle continues. There is no final end, only ongoing effort. Yet within that effort lies meaning. Hold on to hope as a tool, not an illusion. Cherish small victories and learn from setbacks. Build connections even when trust is costly, for solidarity multiplies our strength. Record every lesson and share it with others, so that knowledge spreads like sparks across the frozen darkness. Guard against complacency, but do not let fear paralyze you. Embrace the paradox that vulnerability and courage go hand in hand. To risk for others is to discover the deepest purpose in survival. If you hear this act, form alliances, seek pockets of warmth, innovate with what you find, and keep broadcasting your own stories. In voices shared we find warmth that no polar vortex can extinguish. I close the microphone now, not with certainty of what tomorrow holds, but with resolve. As long as breath warms our lungs and solidarity lights our path, we remain alive and human. The frozen world endures, but so does the spark within us. Stay alive, stay connected, and keep forging light in the long night. Reason,